Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours wants to record 1,000 loiners over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and just tell me what they do all day and let me record how this affects us. Thank you for listening. What did you want to be when you grew up?
So, that's a brilliant question, because if you'd have asked me when I was a kid, I'd have said a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, because I'm one of those oldies who grew up around Turtle Mania, everything. Like, everything in the house was turtles. My brother and I were, like, absolutely turtle mad. We had, like, the dress-up kits, we had the toys, we had the video games, we had literally everything. It was brilliant. And then, I think I was about 7 when I realized that no matter how much pizza I eat, I would never become a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. But luckily, that was around that time, my dad came home from a weekend away with an old computer, an Amstrad CPC 464, which was... for the folks listening in, if you've ever used a ZX Spectrum, it was one of those, but with a tape deck and with all the trimmings taken out, and made by Alan Sugar's company, so AM Strad, Alan M. Sugar Trading, right? So it was made by the guy from The Apprentice, so that was pretty cool. And that was, it was one of those, it was a big clunky, it was a computer and a keyboard sort of thing. But it had like the mechanical switches, so it was like a very clicky clacky tactile feel to the typing. And like I said, it had a tape deck built in, so any games or apps you wanted to run, you'd have to put a cassette tape in, and then hit the play button, then tell it, hey, I'm playing a tape and giving you an app to run. But with it came this book on, like, it was something like BASIC for the Amstrad CPC 464, and I was like, well, what's this? I don't know what this is. I don't know what BASIC is. What's this? And turns out, later that afternoon, I realized that BASIC is a computer programming language, and it was one of the supported computer programming languages for the device. And I just sat there one day, I was just typing away, and people of a similar vintage may have done this with the BBC Micros or something. 10 print, and then a pair of brackets and some speech marks. I am awesome, and hit return. Then go to 10, then type in run, and it would just print I am awesome constantly on the screen. So I've just taught you some programming, by the way. So that's it. You're on your journey. But I did something like that where I was able to prompt and get a response. So I was like, shouted from my brother, come check this out, I've made the computer talk to you. And, he's like 6 or, around that age. And he's like, what do you mean? And I hit return on run, and it asked him, what is your name? And he was like, what? Type it in. So I typed his name in and hit enter, and it said hello and then his name. And he's like, oh my God, you've made the computer do something. Did you do that? I was like, yeah. And I showed him the code, and he's like, how did you know to do that? And I pointed at this book. And then, one rainy summer afternoon, I spent the entire afternoon just reading through that book and reading they call them code listings. So it's just a bunch of code, and then it describes what it does. So I typed all the code in and hit the button, and it would run something. And I'm like, that's cool. And then in order to clear it, you had to sort of switch it off and switch it back on again. So you'd switch it off, switch it back on, type the next bit of code in, and get it to do something. And I remember very distinctly one rainy summer afternoon. I was born and raised on the east coast of England, right? So it's rainy all the time. And I spent all day, like, I got up really early, and I was 7 and I decided not to watch cartoons. So that's how devoted I was, right? No Saturday morning cartoons for me. Just breakfast, straight into the room with the computer and just sat there clacking all day. And it got around to about 7 p.m. and I hit the button to tell it to run. And I got this stick figure walking across the screen, and then the program ended. And I was like, oh, look at what I just did. And I shouted everyone to come in the room. Look, I did that. And essentially, that's when I decided I wanted to be a software developer, and I've lived that wide-eyed boy's dream ever since.
Well, that's a very good story of like how you get into where you were. So that's kind of killed one of my questions. You're listening to Series 5, Episode 9, and to my guest, Jamie Taylor. This is another Squadcast interview recorded on the 5th of February, 2024. Jamie Taylor is a distinguished technologist and visionary leader, boasting over a decade of software development expertise. As the managing director at RJJ Software in Leeds, Jamie clinched the Most Visionary Software Development Managing Director award in 2023. Recognized as a Microsoft MVP, Jamie, among a select group of tech community leaders, seamlessly blends technical mastery in multiple programming languages and paradigms with a strategic partnership approach. Jamie's award-winning Leeds podcast, The Modern.net Show, exemplifies his ability to bridge technical intricacies and real-world impact. Beyond code, Jamie envisions a future where technology propels sustained business growth, positioning him as a transformative force in software development. His relentless pursuit of innovation, commitment to knowledge sharing, and strategic vision make him a sought-after partner for businesses aiming to elevate their tech game. Right, let's do this. Episode 119 of Working Hours with Jamie Taylor. So the next question is, what do you do now? So you've said that you started in software development, but you're not just doing, writing code. What is it that you do now?
Yeah. So currently I am a software developer, software engineer, whatever you want to call it. And I've been doing that for 14 years now. So that's 1-4. Sometimes when I say numbers in the teens, people hear like 20, 30, 40, 50. So I just want to clear that up. 14 years. And that was essentially continuing that wide-eyed young boy's dream of figuring out how to make these computery things do what I tell them. So I went to university in the very early 2000s, graduated, but couldn't get a job doing programming, which was I graduated just before the credit crunch happened in like 2008. And so, everything
after the .com bubble burst as well. So great window to qualify in that industry.
Absolutely, right when nothing was happening. But yeah, so I did that. And then, so what I ended up doing, because obviously that was all, the whole economy and the financial crisis and everything was all a bit wobbly. I went into teaching and, started doing my, whatever it is. It wasn't the PGC, I think it was NQT, it's newly qualified teacher. So you could take the training and do the teaching at the same time. So it's like on-the-job training. Did that for about, I want to say about 18 months. And then I had the opportunity to go out to China to do the same thing, but in China. But that was right as, I don't know if you'll remember, or any of the listeners will remember, there was an Icelandic volcano that no one can pronounce the name of. That blew up and basically grounded everyone everywhere. Which meant that I didn't manage to get because I had to, they emailed me and went, if you can get here, you have the job. So I was like, right, how do I get there then? And I was looking into everyone else who was sort of, I don't want to say stranded, but I feel like that's probably a relative term, the relative term to use. But even like Bill Bailey was like tweeting out, I'm stuck in France, so I decided to buy a car and I'm just driving around France. So I was like, aha, maybe if I drive to the continent, I can get there. And just as I was sort of figuring out how that would all fall into place, I got the email saying, no, someone else got here before you did. So, good luck with your future endeavors.
Well, at least you weren't halfway across Asia when you got that.
Absolutely, right. You don't want to land, get off the plane and then get the email. But yeah, then an opportunity came up at a place where a friend of mine was working, and he was like, "I think you'd be perfect for this. Let me just have a word." And I started working there, and that was the first real programming job that I had. I'd done loads of different sort of projects in the background leading up to that, but like professionally, and this would have been about what 2009, 2009, 2010, that kind of time frame.
Mhm.
And that was in like the what do they call it? It's like standards and compliance. So let's say you create a new electro gadget thingamy and it is doing something with radio or something with Bluetooth or something with Wi-Fi. You have to get a bunch of companies to certify your product so that it's only broadcasting within certain frequencies, because each country has its own set of frequencies that you can broadcast in, right? And so you take it to one of these testing houses and they throw it into like a Faraday cage and a whole bunch of different electromagnetic testing chambers, and they do loads of stuff with it, collect all this data, and I was writing some of the software that would sort of combine all of that data together and make it easier to make a report. But I was also working on a software tool to do Zigbee stuff. So I don't know if you've heard of Zigbee, but you know those Philips Hue lights where you can change the color of the light with a little remote? That, essentially. So I was part of like a 2-person team who wrote the app that is used in industry to test for compliance for that. So, that was pretty cool. Can't really talk much about that because it means delving into the standard and avoiding an NDA that I signed. But, it's really interesting stuff. The low level, like actually dealing with bits and bytes and moving things around and turning a light on and turning a light off and then turning it on again to make sure it turns on again. The tests are incredibly verbose. But yeah, done that since 2010 and sort of moved around a bit doing that because, like I said, I am originally from a coastal town on the northeast coast, somewhere along the River Humber. Maybe that's given it away. My accent isn't from there, but that's where I'm from. And then I moved out to Leeds for a while, and then in 2019, I think it was. In 2019, I left my then permanent employment and decided to set up my own company because I was like, I can do this. It's just writing code. What I didn't realize was there's loads more to it. There's like the business aspect of it. But I've been doing that since then. And we're recording this, February 2024. So it's been almost 5 years of doing that. And that's been wonderful. Like the stuff that I've been able to do, the stuff I've been able to work on has been fantastic. There's a couple of Leeds-based companies that I've done some work for, a couple out in like down south in the UK, a couple in the States. I'm actually, today I'm preparing all of my stuff, doing it's not a last minute check, but it's like a 1 month to go check because I'm flying out to the US to do some work out in a large software company based in Seattle that ends in soft. So I'll be out there for a week or so doing some stuff for them. So, I would never have gotten those opportunities had I not started my own. It's not for everyone, I have to say, but that's what I've been doing. I've been working like individually with these companies, providing consultation and software development, all that kind of stuff. So that's a really long way of saying I do software in that for lots of different people.
Yeah, and you have a software business. Yeah. I want to. So we'll kind of go into some of the setting up the business story in a bit, but I want to just briefly ask about that change, moving from teaching into doing what you wanted to do, and was that much of a culture shock? Was it a big change to you, or did you fit right in straight away? Was this like, this is naturally where I want to be, or did it feel like all I'm doing now is just writing code? Like, did the teaching do you think that had any influence in you setting up for yourself?
Oh, I definitely think that it did have influence because teaching is, yes, it's a solitary endeavor when you're in the classroom, right? It's you and a bunch of students. But you're also taking a journey with them, right? You're not just standing there and making, you're not just standing there and shouting knowledge at people. You're helping to make knowledge happen to people, right? And so there'll be someone in the classroom who, so I did high school maths, right? So one of the examples is like Pythagorean theorem, which is when you've got a right angle triangle, right? How do you work out the different sides of the triangle, and how does all that fit together? And there'll be people who can just get it, just like you say, a squared plus b squared equal c squared is like it's crazy, right? A squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? And they just get it. And then some people, you have to draw out a triangle and they just get it. And some people are like, but why am I learning about triangles? And so what I would do then is I can't really do it because this is an audio podcast, but I take 4 squares and put them near each other so that there's a triangle gap. And I'd say, look, okay, you are and I'd make it real. I'd say, look, you are a Greek tiler, right? And there is a small triangle of tiles left, and you need to work out exactly how much of the tile you need to replace this, to put in this gap, right? So you're in this weird room. Maybe it's a circle room, maybe it's a sphere, maybe it's a weird shape, right? You're left with a small triangular area. You need to work out exactly how much of a tile you need to fill in that gap, because you don't want to buy too much. That's too expensive. And you don't want to buy too little, because then you've got to go back and get another one, and there'll be a horrible seam where you've actually glued 2 together to put it together. And so this is how we work it out. We take the square of one, so that's literally the square tile on one side, and the square of another, the square tile on the other side, and that tells you, adding them together gives you the size of the square of the tile on the third side. And so with that, you can then work out like how much of a tile I need to put in the middle. You don't have to measure it. You can just know. You can just do it in your head, or maybe on a piece of paper, right? And by making it real, that helped them to realize. But then that was part of, I learned that by working collaboratively with the other members of staff, right? So I had to go off and say, look, okay, one of, in the last session, one of the students was suffering and couldn't really figure this out. And we sat together, the 5 of us, right, okay, how do we make it work? We'll try like this, try like that, try like that. And it's all a collaborative team effort. You are by yourself in the classroom, but when you're in the staff room or you're connecting with your other your colleagues and your peers, you're exchanging ideas and exchanging thoughts and figuring out how you're going to do it. And then there's that, and then there's what you sometimes find in some schools is each individual department is like a silo. So like the English teachers will only work with the English teachers, right? They won't work with maths or science because it's not English, right? Or they won't work with the foreign languages or anything like that. And one of the things that I started spearheading whilst I was there was I was like, right, maths is like, it's the formula behind how everything works. It explains how languages work. It explains how sciences work. It explains music is just using maths to manipulate people's emotions, right? So let's go and do that. So I went to all the different departments and I was like, right, okay, music. I want to make a poster or something that combines maths with music. Will you help me? Right? You're the expert of that. I'm the expert of this. And like I said, music is just manipulating people's emotions using maths. So let's talk about how we do that. What is an A, right? An A is, or maybe what is middle C? Middle C is 440 hertz. Well, guess what? We could bring science in there. We talk about physics, right? So then there's the 3 of us drafting ideas for this poster about maths, physics, and music and how they're all related. And that way, when a student comes up to you and goes, but why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use it. I'm like, you're literally using it right now. Let me show you, right? And then by bringing everyone together, you're able to achieve that better goal. And I feel like that really helped me with working in. So a lot of the early programming jobs I did were for like digital agencies where you'd be a part of a 1 or 2 or maybe a 4-person team working on one particular project, right? So you might be making a website for Bob's Widgets, right? And Bob's Widgets has, maybe there's a designer and a developer and maybe a content person all working together to build this website to make an interactive, great experience that's, SEO compatible and all that kind of stuff, right? But then what about the people who are working for, Sarah's, I don't know, we said widgets, or Sarah's glasses company, right? They may be doing something that I could use, or I may be doing something that they could use. And so forging those team bonds between all the different teams outside of the team building exercises, which I don't think work that well, right? You just get people going and doing an activity and then they leave, right? That's my opinion. But forming those bonds over the common goal of strip it all down. We're building a website, right? Yes, we're building a website for Bob and building a different website for Sarah, but we're building websites. How am I doing it differently to you? And can I adopt some of your processes to make my job easier? Or are you using a tool that could make my job easier? Or have I got an idea that could make your job easier, right? And doing that, and then applying that same sort of the idea of like the Socratic method of I'm going to ask you questions and almost argue with you, but I'm not wanting to prove you wrong. I'm wanting you to explore your thoughts and your ideas and apply them to our conversation. So that then if I think maybe my way is better, I'm going to ask you questions that make you think about how the different ways of doing things can sort of fit together. And that I feel like that's really worked well for me in both the programming side of things and for the content creation stuff. So like in around 2016, I started writing a blog about software development, and I was like, here's what you need to learn, and these are the things that would be really cool for you to know about. And then that then became making live stream videos where and it might sound boring to non-developers, but I'm sitting there, I'm on Twitch, which is the place where a lot of people live stream, and I'm making an application. And all I'm doing is sharing my screen, and I've got my camera in the corner or whatever. I'm typing away, and people are jumping into the chat. Oh, Jamie, what are you building? And then I'll stop and go, hey, everyone. So I'm building this, that, and the other, and I'm using this technique or this library or this thing, and I don't know yet. I'm working it out as we go. And then I'm building it, and people are shouting up in the chat with like, why don't you do this? Have you tried this library? Have you tried this function? Have you tried doing it like this? And then all of us are learning together. But I mean, the pro tip was that I did know what I was doing. I was just telling them I didn't, right? And then that sort of fosters that idea of we're a collaboration. Then it's less of a competition. It's more of a collaboration. And then everybody's sort of joining in and sharing ideas. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe you should use this other programming language, or what's the tools you're using? And then I would stop and say, right, okay, so I'm sitting here on my, at the time I was using a Mac Air from whatever, 2017 or something. And I'm using these tools and these libraries and these things. But you don't have to do that on a Mac, because all of these are available for Windows, or all of these are available for X or Y or Z. And then we go on this journey, like collectively, of like, yeah, that's cool, but did you know there's a free tool to do this or a paid tool to do that? And it's like everybody's sort of joining in and sharing their ideas. And then I then took that and was like, well, video's great, but it's high bandwidth and it's not great for people who have visual issues. Like if you can't see what I'm doing, then you can't join in. And so I went, well, let's look into podcasting then. And there's this software like framework, this set of tools and libraries and stuff that Microsoft originally created called .NET. There's a really long story, but the very short version is back in 2002, they created a version specifically for Windows and didn't put it anywhere else. So if you're on Windows, you could use .NET and it would help you to build software and build websites and build games and build all this kind of stuff, right? Then in around 2016, they decided to start making it open source, which means they literally gave away the source code for free. You could download it, you could read it, you could hit the button and build it yourself. But with that came them saying, well, guess what? It only worked on Windows for a while. What about if we make it work on Mac OS? And what about if we make it work on this thing called Linux, which is a third operating system option? It itself isn't an operating system. I'm condensing a whole bunch of stuff here to sort of get the idea across. So, there might be some people listening in going, yeah, but Linux isn't an operating system, and it's not, but it gets the point across, right? So they decided to open source it and offer it out for free to everyone. And with that, I noticed, hey, there's lots of people talking about the old .NET. There's no one talking about new .NET. And I want to get this podcasting thing started. So I started a podcast specifically about this new .NET stuff. Like, what is it? How do you use it? How do you get started? Who are some of the people in the community who are doing stuff with it? Where do I go to learn about it? And we're on the 6th year of doing that. And, it's doing pretty well. And I've won awards from it. So I must be doing something right? Yeah. But all of that is applying the knowledge and the techniques and the skills that I learned doing that teacher training. Just like part of it is that Socratic method of, I'm going to ask you a bunch of leading questions to lead you to a point, right? I'm not going to just tell you the answer. I'm going to say to you, right, why do you think that this is a thing? Or why would that, what about this thing would make sense, right? What makes sense to you? Because there's this brilliant this brilliant idea. It is slightly offensive when you first learn about it. It's this brilliant idea created by Terry Pratchett, who was one of my favorite authors ever. And he came up with this idea of lies to children. And the idea with a lie to children is you tell someone just enough information to get the point across. So you may have learnt in school that, the earth is round. You might have been taught it's round like a ball. It kind of isn't. If you imagine you're holding a ball in front of you and you squash the top and the bottom and the very like the outside edges stick out a little bit, that's the shape of the world. But if I say to you as a 4-year-old, this is the shape of the world is like a ball, but you squish it, it's harder for you to initially come to grips with that idea. But if I hold out a ball and say, this is what the earth looks like, but from a million miles away or whatever, you're going to get it immediately. And so the idea is teaching someone just enough information to get the point across at where they're at. And then when they require more information, you give them that more information, but change the paradigm ever so slightly. So like I said to you, the world is not perfect globe. It's kind of squished at the top and the bottom, so it sticks out the sides. So now, that might help explain why, like, the equator, although, like, I was talking to my daughter about this at the weekend. I said, imagine my fist is the world, right? It doesn't rotate perfectly around the middle, like if you're rotating around the north and south poles. It does rotate there, but they aren't right at the very top. They sort of angled a little bit, pointing at the sun for part of the year, so that the south pole is closer to the sun slightly for part of the year, and the north pole is further away. And then in the second half of the year, it flips over. So that way I was able to explain to her that like the world doesn't rotate perfectly unilaterally all the time, and that's helped by the fact that it's squished a little bit at the top and the bottom, and the middle sticks out. The equator part of it sticks out a little bit, and she got it, and she was like, oh no, that totally makes sense. That's why it's hotter in Africa than it is, say, here in the UK today. Absolutely. And we went on that journey. But being able to apply that knowledge and use the metaphor, use the Socratic method, use those ideas that get you to the point where people just kind of understand just a little bit more than they did before to help them get to the next step. That's where I live, right? That's where I want to be, because I love that moment when I can help people learn that stuff. So that's a really long explanation of, I think working as a teacher really helped, but I think also working in retail. So I did, while I'm jumping backwards and forwards in my story here, so I do apologize. But like throughout college and uni, I worked in retail, specifically in video game retail. And I tell people to this day, like I am gallivanting towards 40, and I still tell those young whippersnappers, you ought to do 6 months in retail. I don't care which 6 months you do, but you need to do 6 months in retail. And I genuinely believe that everyone should do 6 months to a year in retail. The 6 months is just enough time to cover either like the Easter period or the Christmas period or like a number of birthdays and stuff. And the reason for that is because you get on the job training of how to deal and be compassionate with people who are very angry at you for something you haven't done. Right. So when I was working in retail, you come up to Christmas, it's video games. We're talking, early 2000s into like 2008, 2009. And at that point, you're like, everybody's getting video games for Christmas and things like that. Right. And so you get people who come in on Christmas Eve and say, you don't have this game. I saw it here 4 months ago and you don't have it. You've ruined my Christmas. And your natural reaction might be to get angry and say, I didn't do anything. You should have bought the game when it came in. But actually, the compassionate reaction is, well, hold on a second. We've got 3 other stores in the city. Let me call. It sucks that has happened. Absolutely sucks. Let me see what I can do to find out a way of getting you this game so you can walk away happy and it makes everything better, right? So I'll just just run over to this phone, call the other stores, see if they've got a copy. If they've got one, I'll get them to put it to one side for you. You can walk straight to the till, skip the queue, and get that game. Because and that's required, because then you realize that isn't the only shop that person's going in that day, right? Maybe they're doing last minute Christmas shopping and they're doing all of their Christmas shopping last minute. And so you're trying to help them out. And it's less about the customer's always right and more about how do I help you achieve your goal, which is something that I've sort of come around to. Again, I've circled back around to it in the last 3-4 years, where I'm like, we as software people, as technologists, it's not about writing the software. It's not about shipping software and getting it out the door. It's about helping people to achieve what they want to achieve. And if you'll indulge me for one last story here, Simon, I apologize to you and everyone who's listening in.
No, I'm listening and enjoying it. So, you know.
This is what it's like, right? If we were to meet in the pub or meet at a coffee shop, this is what I do. I jump about in time. But there is actually a through line for folks who are listening. The thing that I say to people is, the example that I give is a number of years ago, I interviewed a chap, Dylan Beatty. He invented a programming language called Rockstar, primarily because he's into 80s hair metal, but also because in the early 2000s there were a lot of job ads for rockstar developers who are the best at, they come in with their sunglasses and they just do everything, and then that changed to ninja developers. But anyway, rockstar developer as a key phrase by recruiters came back around in like the 2010s, 2012s, that kind of thing. And so he said, why don't I create a language called Rockstar, and then you can legitimately be a rockstar developer? Anyway, that's got nothing to do with the story I'm about to tell, but it's a nice little flavor story there. And when I was talking to him, he was saying the problem with software is we don't really have a code of ethics. Most of the time, we're operating under extremely difficult circumstances. We've got 3 to 6 months to build an app, and there's 2 years worth of work you got to do in 3 to 6 months. And so he said to me, what tends to happen, and I advise listeners not to look up this story. There is a story of a device called the Therac 25. I get a load of stick from my friends for bringing this story up all the time. But the Therac 25 was a radiation-giving machine for providing treatments with radiation, right? So you would type in 100 and it would give 100 whatever radioactive units they were. You'd say 100 over 60 minutes. Over 60 minutes, it would slowly give the person 100 whatever units, milliwatts, milliferrums. I don't know what it is. But
wouldn't it be Geigers, I'm guessing?
I don't know. Probably. Yeah, it's 100. Let's call it 100 whatevers, right?
All right, but someone can listen and look it up and let us know.
Absolutely. Please do reach out, because I would love to know what it is, because I don't know what it is at this moment. And I'm one of these chaps where if I get something wrong, I want to be told I got it wrong, because then I can learn and be better at stuff and carry on. Anyway, back to the story. So this Therac 25, the operator could type in how many millijoules, milli whatevers, and they type in, say, 1,000. And they go, oh, actually, no, it's not 1,000, it's 100. So they push delete, 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 and start again. So they clear it out, type in 100. The problem was that the display changed, but the number didn't. So you type in 1,000, you hit delete 4 times, the display clears. You type in 100, it would say 100. But actually, it's giving 1,100,000, what would it be? 1,000 with 2 extras, so it'd be 10,000, 100,000 whatevers of radiation, which is like 1,000, 10,000 more than you should have done, right? And people actually died. And this is because the software wasn't built with that compassion, with that idea in mind. What is the user trying to do? And the other example that he gave was at the time, and I don't know how different this was around 2018. He said at the time, in order to qualify as a practicing lawyer, you have to go on this website. You've done your studies, you've done your internship, you go on this website, you type in all your details, and you hit send. And there's a 24 to 48 hour period of time to send this information in. And if you don't get it in time, you don't qualify, you don't graduate, you don't reach that next step, whatever that next step is. The next step doesn't really matter for the story I'm telling. But there's this 48 hour period. Now, some people, most people, might jump on that website as soon as it's available and start adding their details and hit go and brilliant, it's done, sorted. But life doesn't always work that way. Some people aren't able to access it through personal reasons. Maybe there's something going on in their life, or maybe they look after other people, or maybe they're on holiday or something. Something happens, right? Your internet breaks, something like that, right? You're finally able to get on and use this system. It's 2 a.m. and the system will stop working at 6 a.m. because that's the cutoff point. But the software's not working because you've typed it all out in Word and you've copied it over, but there's these weird characters that appear and it doesn't let you have those weird characters. So now you've got to go back and delete all these weird characters. And then you hit go and it's like, well, no, you've attached a Word document, but I need a PDF. But I didn't tell you that, but now I'm telling you, you need to attach a PDF. And so there's people at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, crying and pulling their hair out because this software is not very well built. It's not built to make it easy for that person to submit this information. Because at the end of the day, that software is there to help someone achieve a job and that achieve a task, complete something, move on to the next stage of whatever. That job is, I push a button, I go to the next step of my career.
And it's not like a testing criteria for the... I mean, I suppose you can make the argument that it is, or if you can't use this, but I mean, it's not really, because it's like, you know, the situations you're giving there is like, these are things that plausibly exist. So, you know, this might happen to you. That is not like you being a really, really rubbish lawyer. Sometimes things happen, and it's like, if I can still get it in time, I'm still in time. Yeah. So anything... any part of that window you can increase and make longer for yourself is great. So yeah, anyway, but I'm building on your point, so I hopefully didn't waylay you too much, Don.
Of course, yeah. But like, you've got people, if you don't submit within this 48-hour period, you have to literally wait till next year. There's no recourse, there's no, the software didn't work, there's no, my dog ate my homework, there is nothing.
It's just unfair and unreasonable. It's just, yeah.
It is. Yeah, and it's been created for a bunch of arcane reasons that don't exist anymore because we don't live in that world anymore. But if you don't get it finished within this 48-hour period or this 24-hour period, I can't remember off the top of my head, then you will not reach the next step of your career, which means that if you don't do it, you have to wait till next year. So your whole life, your entire career is put on hold for a year. And then when you reach that next step, you then have to explain why. Oh, well, I was held off by a year because the software's broken, because the software didn't work, right? And because the software doesn't work is like the 21st century version of the dog ate my homework, right? And you can't realistically get away with that. And the software not working isn't meant to be, the software isn't meant to be there for helping the person at the other end achieve their goal. The software is there for the user to achieve their goal. If my phone doesn't work, right? For the people listening, I'm holding my phone up for no real reason. But if my phone doesn't work and I can't make a phone call, that's a fundamental failure of that phone, right? The phone call is there to aid me in the goal of calling someone. All I want to do is call someone. I might want to call my brother, might want to call my mum, might want to call for the emergency services. If my phone is not working, that's a fundamental failure in how the software on the phone works. All right, there might be other things like the network might be down, or like I might have run out of battery power. But assuming all things are equal, you've got good signal, the battery's working, you've got a working service, maybe you're paying a contract or whatever, and you want to call someone. If the phone app on your phone doesn't work, that's not your fault. That's the fault of the phone, fault of the manufacturer. And they failed at that fundamental task of letting you do the thing you want to do, right? If you need to do some calculations, you pull up the calculator app on your phone, on your computer, on a calculator, whatever, and that doesn't work. That's failed the fundamental task of being a calculator, right? Because someone somewhere hasn't thought, right, okay, how is someone actually going to use this software? And that's where I live. I'm like, I want to bring back compassion-based engineering and software development because it's so important that people are able to actually do the thing they want to do. And so when I'm building software for someone, I'm not sitting there going, right, what do you want to achieve? I do care about you, the project manager. I do care about you, the company. But what does the customer, what does the user want to achieve, right? That's where I live. Because if they can achieve what they want to do, then automatically the person who's asking me to build the software will achieve what they want to do. I can make it do what the person who's buying the software wants without making it so that the user can do what they want, right? But that will lead to a terrible experience and people won't use that software and people will associate your company, brand, whatever, with failure. And so I'm sort of trying to lead this charge of swapping these things around. But all of that, it's a really long story, I do apologize, but all of that is based on my experience of working as a teacher, working in retail, because in those environments, yes, your job is to shift the product, but you need to work compassionately with those, the students, the consumers, all of that stuff. You need to apply that compassionate ability to actually say to people, hey, look, I know you're having a crap day. I know that the thing you wanted to buy is not that. Because like, for me, if I go into a store and they don't have what I want, it's not the end of the world. But maybe that person is neurodivergent. Maybe they're, autistic in some way. Maybe they have Asperger's. Maybe they are, they're having a really, really bad day and having a mental health issue, right? I don't know. But me turning around to them and go, no, we ain't got it. See you later. That's not going to help them, even if they don't have those things. But if I say, that sucks, it looks like we've run out, but bear with me a minute, I'm going to see if we've got one in the back. Maybe we've got one in another shop. And I'll also have a look online for you as well, right? Because we've got an online shop. Maybe I can have it delivered to this store tomorrow. You come back tomorrow, pick it up, right? Because at that point, all I'm doing I'm not doing anything in any way bad. I'm actually improving that person's experience of coming into that store. But I'm not doing it for, oh, well, we'll go back to that store because that store's great because, they do those things. It's because I don't want that person to leave that communication thinking that there's nothing else that can be done and their whole day is ruined. And you might be thinking, folks listening might be thinking, yeah, but if I'm going into like a bakery to buy a sausage roll or something, it's not going to be the end of the world if they don't have them. No, it isn't. But if you're going into like, I don't know, like somewhere where you're going to buy some emergency piece of equipment, that is a big deal, right? And so what you don't want is people just to go, nah, mate, don't work. Nah, mate, we ain't got one. See you later. Because that sucks. Whereas maybe I'm a humanist. I don't know. I've gone on a really wild tangent there. And I think the question was, how does your education training help with development?
Yeah, I mean,
an answer in there somewhere.
Well, I think there's a really interesting sort of thing about service and sales and thinking about sales as a service, which you can do, but I mean ultimately the sale is to make money. But then is it? I mean, yeah, on a practical financial kind of continuum it kind of is, and you have to make the money and you have to get the money in, but everyone does a bit of pro bono work here and there and adds in a little extra and as part of the service. And as much as sometimes the transaction between two people of like you're buying off someone has more knowledge than the other person, the seller's always trying to get more out of the sale than they can, and the buyer's trying to get more without spending more out of the sale and so on. But there is a level at which it's like it is a social exchange as well, and it's a social performance, and it's kind of when you think about good service or someone selling you a product that you're really happy with, like the service is often part of that. I don't know. There's loads in there. There's loads in there to kind of pull apart and explore and so on. Maybe we'll revisit it depending on how the rest goes. But I'm going to move us not so much about setting up the business. Maybe some of that will come up here, but I'll move us into questions. So we'll start off with COVID, which we can touch upon. If you can think back to going into lockdown and sort of what was the level of work like at the time? What was the reaction to that? Was it sort of really, really busy doing the ringing around everyone saying, well, I don't know what's happening. Hang on, I'll call you back. Or was it nobody ringing anybody and you had nothing to do twiddling your thumbs? Or were you just like, well, this doesn't really change much for us. We're all online, so we'll just crack on and go ahead. So how did that go? And then coming out the other side, what have been the changes for you to how you work from COVID?
Yeah. So sometimes I talk about life as BC and AC, right? Before COVID and after COVID. So like before COVID, I would be traveling around a lot to client sites, and, going in and sitting down, having a meeting in person, or sitting there, opening a laptop and, just cracking on with some work, get some work done, and then travel back home, maybe commuting, maybe taking a train or whatever. And it felt like overnight there was this period of time where everyone was like, wait, what does this actually mean? But I took a very, very proactive response. Without going into it too much, I have some very vulnerable people in my life. And, I'm not going to talk about the politics around it and all that kind of stuff and, the masks and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, look, if there is a chance that me traveling 2 hours in, a westerly direction could mean that I bring it home with me, regardless of how people feel about it, then someone in my household, in my immediate family, or in my extended family, could die. right? And so I took the then immediate reaction of, I emailed around all of the clients I had at that time, and was like, I'm not coming in. We're going to have to go online. I am going to do, we were doing a number of client calls online anyway. And I was like, if you need some help setting things up, I will help you, but I'm not coming in. Because, regardless of whether you think, because there was a lot of response of, is it real? Is it not? I'm not going into that. But like, there were, from my perspective, I like to be a bit of a cautious chap, right? And with people in my immediate and extended family being incredibly vulnerable, I was like, I'm not doing it because I don't want to be that one person who then has to stand there and go, I'm really sorry, but it was cause of me, right? And so I immediately stopped going to client sites, immediately stopped going to physical meetings and meetups. And quite frankly, that made my life way easier. Right? Because I wasn't doing the 2+ hour commute there and a 2+ hour commute back for a 15-minute interview, right? And so it meant that
kind of dead time, isn't it? Because it's like,
yeah,
that's part of that service thing. You're providing that service, but you're getting, unless you're enjoying the train, the view out the train or whatever, and just being out is getting me out of the house. But really, you're not getting anything out of that. There's no real value there apart from for the train company. Yeah, so sorry again.
No, I appreciate it. You're absolutely right. And so immediately, like within 2 days of the first grumblings of a lockdown being announced, I was like, right, I'm not commuting in anymore. I'm not coming into any meetings. You're not going to see me physically for a while until all of this is blown over. And I explained quite clearly and quite concisely to all of these clients, this is precisely why, regardless of whether this thing exists or not. And like I said, I never went into my own personal politics of it. I was like, if it does, people are not going to come out of this well. And I don't want me to come out of this unwell. I don't want you to come out, because it's not just me going there and possibly bringing it home. It's me going there and taking it to you, right? Because I was explaining to someone at the weekend about how we in Britain, up until like in the BC times, right? It's not so much now in AC times, but in the BC times, it used to be, oh, well, I've got a bit of a sniffle and, I'm not well, but I'll go into the office. And it's like, well, no, because if I work with 25 people and I go in ill, 25 people are going to get ill, right? It's and it's not just 25 people, it's 25 people and all the people who live with them or all the people who interact with them on a daily basis. If I'm going into work and I'm stopping by the coffee shop, the person I interact with directly at the coffee shop is going to get it, which means everyone else who works at the coffee shop is going to get it. I'm just talking about a cold here. I'm not talking about COVID or anything like that, but like anything that I travel about with, every single person I interact with, there is a greater than 0% chance of passing that on. Do I sound like a hypochondriac? Probably. Does it mean that I'm working towards, in my own little part of the world, a safer part of the world? Probably not. Who knows? But I was talking to this person at the weekend about, this is what it used to be like. People would be ill and go into the office. And then it's not just that person that's taking it to the office, it's the people in the office. And then it's the families of the people in the office. Then if they have children and the children go to school, they're taking it to school. And then the teachers and the other families, and that's how things spread. And I was like, that is how it used to spread. Someone comes into the office with a sniffle, everyone at the office gets a sniffle. But then maybe you come out the other side of it stronger because you've had the sniffle and now you're slightly immune to it. But
you've got to risk assess, like, just if you want to think of it in purely business terms, you've got to take a risk assessment of like, okay, what does this do? So even if you want to be coldly calculating about that or even say you're being overly cautious, it's like, no, well, because if I got it, right, first of all, that's 2 weeks potentially that you can't work at all, like a sort of week at a minimum. And then there's the like further infection and so on. And then there's reinfection now, even if you have been vaccinated and so on. But yeah, like you have to think about, can I afford to be shut down for an entire week by something that then also, like, I mean, I don't know if that, in terms of your workforce, how many people you work for and so on, but like, does that further extent as well? But yeah, just for yourself, I mean, being taken out of work for a week when you're working for yourself, that's that's a big dent, and that's like a business risk that you've really got to look at. So even just at that purely kind of like callous, non-human level, you've already like, I mean, I think it's fully justified. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the freelancers and people like that who are listening in will be going, yes, I 100%, because if I don't work, I don't get paid, right? I got a friend of mine who's a copywriter, and there's a whole bunch of stuff related to his line of business and, you know, machine learning and things like that, how that's cutting into his bottom line. But then if he does indeed get a cold or is ill for some reason, if he's not producing things for his clients, he doesn't get paid. It's that simple. And you're right. If can you afford to take 2 days out to rest up, versus can you afford to take a week off because you're actually ill and you've spread something and everybody's infected, right? Regardless of what it is. Like I said, it could be a cold. It could be like, I don't know, some other. I don't want to walk into,
Novavirus.
let's talk about diseases, but you know what I mean, right? It could be anything, right? Yeah, it could be novavirus or whatever. So, yeah, I immediately kind of stopped working on the commute stuff, right? Because some of my clients were 50, 60, 70, 80 miles away, right? And, you know, that's a long distance. You know, that's an hour plus of commute time. Whether
air exchange and surfaces. And,
Exactly, right? And you know, you just have to next time you're on a train, just sit and watch people. Don't look at your phone. Don't read a book. Don't read the newspaper. Do it slyly so you're not like staring at someone, but like look at how many times people will wipe their nose and then touch the table, or will cough without covering their mouth, right? And you're doing that, and that's in a perfectly safe environment, right? Because, you know, like you said, you know, we're all, a bunch of us are vaccinated now, or we're doing a lot better. But then go get on a commuter train. Now, I don't know if you've ever taken one of the commuter trains, like the rush hour commuter trains from, say, Leeds out to Manchester, or ever been on the tube in London. You have no personal space. You're jammed in there like sardines, right? One person walks in with a cold. Yeah. One person walks onto that train with a cold. Everyone is walking off with a cold. It is that simple, right? Because you're almost nose to nose with people. So if somebody's going to sneeze, they're sneezing at and on you, right? And so I was like, you know, it's fine. I'm okay with not doing this commutes and stuff like that. But on top of that, right? At the time, my daughter was like, I really care about the planet, Dad, and we need to do what we can to reduce greenhouse gases. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And me driving for 3-4 hours to get somewhere is producing a ridiculous amount of greenhouse gases, so that I can sit in a room, do a 15-minute meeting that I am essential for, an essential meeting, right? That can't be done online. That we then suddenly found out 6 months later, every single thing could be done online. Just so that we can have this meeting and then drive all the way back. All that greenhouse gases, right? Now, it's different for trains and buses because they're always running, right? I'm pretty sure that when the world ends, there'll be 4 cockroaches, trains, buses, and planes still going, right? There'll be no one on them, but they'll still be flying, still be driving, right? Because and for multiple reasons, it's more expensive not to run them than it is to run them. It's really stupid. But and then you add on top of that, like the road traffic accidents. It's frankly embarrassing how many people get into road traffic accidents during rush hour, and I'm like, I don't want to drive into someone. I don't want to have someone drive into me.
Well, you look at the number of deaths, and like socially, we've just gone, no, that's fine. And then, you know, beyond deaths, there's all the like injuries and disablements and like, and we're just like, worth it. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly, right? So I think the short answer, the short version of, I'm doing this a lot, aren't I? Producing lots of long answers, but there's lots of content for you, so that's okay.
Podcasters talking to podcasters.
Absolutely. But the short answer is that COVID didn't affect my work at all, because, you know, a lot of people went online, and I was like, well, I've got a subscription to Zoom, and I have Google Meet, and I have Teams, and I have all these apps that were created by software. So the other thing you got to remember, right? That there's a brilliant line by a by a chap called Jim Burke, who goes by the name Mr. B, the Gentleman Rhymer. He invented chap hop, which is hip hop but in a received pronunciation. And there's a line in one of his songs that was produced during lockdown where he says, Generation X got this covered, y'all. And we really do. We have this covered. Software development has been done remotely for decades at this point. Microsoft, entirely remote. Like, I've met people at Microsoft who work in Seattle, who work in Portland, who work out in New York, who work over in India, who work... They're all working on the same team, but they're all in different time zones. They do that. Why can't I? Right? Stack Overflow is one of the biggest websites for software developers ever. If you ever Google, like, how do I write a program to do X, Y, and Z, you will invariably end up on Stack Overflow. It is a question and answers website where people will ask questions like, I want to integrate Stripe into my app. How do I do that? And someone will answer it, and then there'll be a big discussion, and people can like say, this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer, you've got this right, you've got this wrong. It's like a collaborative question and answer system. But their entire team is geolocated all over the planet. There's people in the New York office. Like, they're a New York-based company. There's like 4 people who work in the New York office. One of the best programmers they ever had worked out of a barn in Nebraska, right? In a barn, right? And I want you to picture every time you've seen a movie where they have, like, they're in America and they go into a rural place and it's a barn. It's like a really big building with chickens and that. That was his office, right? And he worked entirely remotely. And the way that they worked was they used tools like Teams and Zoom and all that kind of stuff. And then they would get people together once a year in a different city. They'd pay for everyone to fly out. They all get together and have maybe 2 or 3 days of just being to get no work's done, just like hanging out and getting to know each other. We've got this covered. And I saw a lot of backlash against it. I mean, I say this, right? I'm lucky enough to do one of these jobs that can be done remotely. And I don't take that for granted. But like when I would have clients say to me, none of our people are in the office, but you need to come to the office. I was like, why? There's no one there. Yeah, but like the door will be open and you can go in and you have to work from there. And I'm like, why? No one's there.
So we can see you on CCTV and know you're working.
That's exactly it. And it was all about a lack of trust. And if you don't trust the people who's like, if you hire a cleaner and you don't trust the cleaner, get rid of the cleaner, right? Or change your attitude and maybe think about whether you should trust the cleaner, right? Don't don't worry about, oh, well, they must be clean. They must be cleaning me out by stealing stuff. You got to think, well, actually, let's look into their references. Let's look into their past cleaning clients and see what they say. If everybody says, nah, this Jamie who comes around to clean my house, stole all my stuff and stole my house, like actually they kicked me out and stole my house, then you probably don't hire the cleaner, right? But if the cleaner that you're hiring is actually doing the work, you don't need to be there. You don't need to watch them. They're doing the work, right? And that's exactly the same kind of argument, right? If you take your car in to the garage for them to do some kind of service on it, you're not going to stand over them and watch them to make sure they're doing the work. There's an element of trust in that you're buying the services of the mechanic to actually do the work on your car. And when you come out of it, you've got the bits and pieces of paperwork that say, yes, Jamie actually did this work. He changed this, he changed that, he changed this, he fixed this and that. And then if nothing is actually fixed, you could take it back and say, you've given me the paperwork that says you did it and you haven't done it. But that won't happen because it's not worth the negative press of not doing the work and just giving you the bit of paper. Because it's not just negative press; it's they can get sued and all that. I've gone way off the deep end with this metaphor, but what I'm getting at is that there were still people who were saying you could do the work remotely, but you have to come in. I'm like, that's
yeah. Why it's the business is full. Well, I suppose everything is, like you've worked in education, I'm sure you found that as well, but it's sort of full of people doing these things that are just like, you haven't thought about that at all, have you? Of like, it makes no sense to do that. It's like the whole thing of being in call centers where they're like, we have a dress code. It's like, why do you have a dress code? Everybody's on the bloody phone. Like, oh, well, we find we get better performances and stuff. It's like, let people stand up then, like, if they're doing sales or whatever, most people are better when they're stood up. And I know a lot of places do. But the point is, like, you don't need to have the clothes. If you've got the culture, you don't need to have people wearing shiny shoes and a tie to answer the phone. Like, you can do that without putting in a ridiculous rule that makes no sense to anybody.
100%. So yeah, largely COVID didn't affect anything. You know, it was mainly the greenhouse gases and the transport that I was worried about, bringing it home and stuff like that. Because I'd read a lot of stories of again, I don't want to get into the weeds of, you know, the politics side of it, but like I read a lot of stories of people who were working in the medical industry who were like, they set up outdoor showers and they would get home and scrub before they walked in the house. And I was like, that is superhuman, right? That is absolutely heroic, regardless of whether it's real, regardless of what's going on. My own personal opinion is, of course, it's real. You know, it's impossible for three people to keep a secret. You really think? Anyway, I'm getting into. Let's just step away from that before we get all angry. Comments go to Jamie at. But no, but regardless of whether it's real or not, like having to do that is superhuman. Like getting home and having a 45-minute shower to actually, and then walking into the house naked because you can't wear the clothes you were in work with is superhuman.
How long is it going to be, do you think, before we see, you know, the documentary, the official narrative documentaries of like, here's the true story of what happened, you know, like footage from the front line and stuff, and they start going through some of what we all saw happening at the time. That's kind of, you know, socially we've all kind of gone, no, let's not think of that. Yeah, you're
but
right. I think like at some point, you know, like if we're all around still, there's going to be that documentary of like the truth of COVID and how it was like here and stuff, and you will see some really, really horrendous and shocking stuff in that, but it'll be only, you know, a tiny part of the story. But yeah, I'm sure that'll come at some point. Absolutely.
But yeah, it didn't really affect the work that, because I you know, I'm dialing in as a long time listener, first time caller. I'm dialing in from my home office, right? I'm sitting in my home office. This is where I sat. But from like a personal perspective, what I decided to do at the time, and it worked out really well for me, because like I started to feel a little bit cabin fevery. And so from like a personal a reaction point of view, what I did was I'd get up, do the whole bathroom thing, get dressed, all that kind of whatever it is everyone's morning is, do the breakfast thing, and then I'd walk out the house, right? I tell people this all the time, and they're like, this is such a great idea. It's not my idea. I stole it from someone. You walk out the house and you walk around the block, or you go for a short walk in a very specific direction. So for me, I walk out the house, I turn left, and I walk over that way and come back, so that then when I'm coming into the house, I'm coming in through the same door, but I'm not coming back the way I came. I'm going around in a big circle, right? Yeah. And I come in. I've commuted to work, right? It's still the same thing, because your brain just goes, now I'm commuting. And then you walk in, you're like, now I'm at work. Yeah, right? And then at the end of the day, I'd come out of the house and do the same journey, but in the opposite direction. So instead of turning left, I'd turn right and go around the other way. And let's say I've gone clockwise in the morning, I'll go anti-clockwise in the evening or whatever. If I'm going west and then south, then east, I'll go east and south and west on the way back. Because you're doing the same thing you would have done in the BC times, right? In that you're leaving the house, you're going on a journey, you're coming into a building and getting to work. Rather than going bedroom, computer, it was bedroom, breakfast, out the door, into the door of the office, ta-da, I'm at work. And then at the end of the day, out the door to the office, go for a walk, come back into the house, ta-da, I'm home from work, right? And that, it wasn't really long walks. It was like, I got it down to like a minute and a half it was, because I was like, how short do these walks have to be for it to make a difference to me? And it was walk to the end of the street and round the block and come back like almost in the same direction. Because I started with like doing a 1-2 mile walk every day. And I was like, this is great, brilliant for cardiovascular. I'm getting loads of fresh air, lots of exercise, of moving about. But also I'm really lazy because I'm a computer programmer and I like sitting down. So I reduced it, and I got down to 30 seconds. And I could still do it, just walk around the house for 30 seconds and it still works, right? And so that's what I did. And I passed that on to as many people as I found, not just for during the lockdowns, but like if you work remotely or hybrid, do this in your morning, because, and if you're where I live, and where my office is situated, there's only one door into the house, into that area of the house. But if you have two doors, most people have two doors in their house, go out of one, walk around, come in through the other, right? Because you're leaving the house and walking into work. And then when you leave, go out the door you came in and walk around to the door you came out of in the morning. And you've commuted to and from work. It's a brilliant little life hack. Little things like that, right? And what I also found was, like, if I was stuck or if I couldn't do something, I couldn't figure something out, or if I needed to, there's that one task everyone has to do every day that we really hate, right? And you're like, I don't want to do this. It's going to take way too much effort. I won't get any reward out of it. I don't want to do it. So I'd get up and go for a walk. I'm going out for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. I'll go to the park or whatever, go for a walk, and then come sit back down. I've been outside, I've got the fresh air, been surrounded by nature. It's reset my brain. And I'm like, you know what? I can crack on with this now and get it done. And I would sit and get that actual task done. But if you're in an office, you can't do that. 'Cause as soon as you walk out the door, the boss is standing there with his watch going, okay, that's your 15-minute break done. And now you have to stay late afterwards. Right? You can't do that. But being able to walk out of the house and just go stand outside for those 5-6 minutes it takes, it boosts your effectiveness. And I always talk about effectiveness rather than productivity, because you can be incredibly productive but actually get nothing done, right? Whereas you can't be effective without getting something done, right? And so stepping out of the house and going for a walk and having a look around and then coming back and going, right, okay, yes, I was away for 5 minutes, but I'm actually going to get an hour's worth of work done in 15 minutes, because otherwise I'd have sat there and just stared at the screen or, gone out of my head trying to figure out how to get it done. But walking away and coming back is giving me the mental break I required to actually see the other side of the problem. And so, but traditionally, you can't do that in an office environment. And so, that was one of the little tricks that I used to actually help me to get past those things. And none of these are my tricks. These are tricks that I've learned from other people. Because as soon as it happened, I joined several different groups of people who were like, how do we remain productive and effective whilst working from home? And I was talking to people who had worked from their own offices or worked from remote offices their entire career. And they were like, these are the things you want to do. So, I mean, listeners can't see, right? But I went down to IKEA and I bought these. These are brilliant. I'm holding up a plastic plant in a plastic tub, right? The entire thing is plastic, right? It's not great for the environment because it's plastic. But what's great about these is they're great for your brain. There's a brilliant book called Remote by Rebecca Seal, and there's loads of hints and tips in there for working remotely or working hybrid. And it was actually released way before the pandemic, but it actually is one of those books that I bought during it, and I was like, these tips are amazing. And what she said was she'd read through a whole bunch of psychological studies about how to be really effective in an office. Turns out having plants around you and greenery around you and life around you makes you more productive, because I'm not wanting to get into it, but several thousand years ago, we weren't living most of our lives in houses. We were out and about, go back several thousand years before that, we're probably living in caves or living in small groups who were living in forests. You're surrounded by nature. We have become accustomed in our brains to be surrounded by nature. And so having a plant in your office will help you to be more productive, more effective, help you with problem solving. But the crazy thing is, it doesn't actually have to be a live plant. You can have some plastic ones. And so I've got a whole bunch of these IKEA plastic plants. These ones, I think I got 3 in a box for like £1.70 or something like that. It's stupid cheap. And they're just dotted around my area where I do my work. And I can't say for sure whether they've made me more productive or effective or made me better at the job I'm doing, but I certainly feel better with them around. Maybe that's psychosomatic because I've read the psychological studies. Maybe it's not. But I do know that if I get stuck and I go outside and I go sit under a tree for 10 minutes, or as my friend Zach calls it, go and touch some grass for 10 minutes, I feel way better. And I can calm down. I can go, you know what, Jamie, you've got this. You've solved this problem before. You got really worried and couldn't see the wood for the trees, if you'll pardon the expression. And now that you've gone and sat outside for 10 minutes, here's what you did last time. All right, cool. And then I get back and I'm getting back to the office faster because I'm like, I need to fix this now. I've got the idea in my head. I need to get back now before I forget. And maybe that's because I'm going outside and sitting under a tree. Maybe it's because I'm just stepping away from the problem. I don't know. But I tell everyone who comes into my office, get a bunch of these plastic plants because they are amazing. They really will help. Or indeed, if you have actual plants, get those instead because they're probably way better for you because they're actually producing oxygen and they're not made of, dead animals, which is what plastic is made of. So, but yeah, I picked up loads of these little tips from joining these groups. Just like, how do I thrive, right? Because I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive. I wanted to be better than I was. And the one thing I didn't do was there's this brilliant video by GCP Grey, who is a YouTuber, and he talks about Spaceship U. I'll send you the link if you want to put it in the show notes, but there's this video that he put out just at the beginning of the pandemic. It was perfectly timed. And he talked about, this is our time to focus on ourselves. And he talks about Spaceship U is, because he uses it as a metaphor for being locked down away from everyone. If you're on a spaceship by yourself, there's just you there. And he talks about how you need 4 key areas to actually be able to thrive. You need the rest area, you need recreation, you need a workspace. And, he talks about, take 10 minutes out of your day and just go walk up and down the stairs a couple of times, or, and it's a brilliant video. It's all sort of animated with stick figures in that. If you've ever watched any of his videos, it's in that same style, but it changed my view on everything when I watched that video. And it works for remote workers. It works for hybrid workers. It works for people who work physically in a physical space that is away from their home. It just changes your view on everything. If you're able to apply his ideas and teachings to anything that you do. So I would definitely recommend that. I'll get the link for you for sure. And if you want to put it in the show notes, definitely do. But if you don't want to click there, if you're listening, folks, click through to the show notes for sure. But if you just want to search it up now, it's Spaceship U. So the word spaceship and the word you as in you and me, YOU. Just put that into your search engine of choice and I'm sure it'll come up because it's a brilliant little video. It's only about 10 minutes long. It won't take you very long to get through. You're sitting, maybe you're commuting on the train or whatever. You've got 10 minutes. Watch this video. You're sitting at home and, you're waiting for your tea to brew. You've got a few minutes. Watch this video, right?
Okay. So I'm not going to respond to anything. I'm going to crack on with questions. So I'm going to move us on to climate change because you kind of mentioned it there. Obviously, it's something you're concerned about, if not your daughter's concerned about as well. So, in terms of climate change, is there anything that you can do work-wise? Obviously, you've got rid of the commuting. You're walking more. I mean, to put it in a more simple way, like, do you have a program? Do you have it kind of built into the design of your organization? Or is it just, do you see it as something that's, I suppose what I'm really asking with this question is kind of like, what's your working relationship with the kind of green side of things? Is it something that you have to do for business, or is it something you're trying to introduce into business, I guess?
So from my perspective, I'm a little worried about a lot of companies instigating their green policies, and effectively some of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but some companies are just buying tax credits against the CO2 that they're using, right? That's not actually green. That's just paying a bunch of money to be able to stick your fingers in your ears and go, la, 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 we're green, right? You're not, because that money doesn't actually go to doing anything. You're just paying a tax on the greenhouse gases you're creating. Whereas what we do, first off, like you said, we're a remote first company, right? So all of my colleagues can work from wherever they want. Colleagues and employees, I prefer colleagues rather than employees. I am the director of the company, but I'm like, you're a colleague of mine. We're working together. We're on a team, right? Any of my colleagues can work from wherever they want, as long as they are mindful of any NDAs that are involved in the work that they do, right? And so just real quick, the podcast that I create, the .NET one, I do talk to a lot of people from Microsoft, and I'm like, when you're working on the Microsoft ones, I'm going to mandate you work from home because because they're talking to me about things that are coming out soon, And if you unplug your headphones or your headphones disconnect or whatever, suddenly they're broadcasting to the coffee shop that you're in, hey, and in 6 months we're going to release this new product, right? I don't want that to happen, right? So as long as they're cautious of NDAs, they can work from wherever they want. They can also work whenever they want, but that's not part of our green initiative, as it were. Like my lead on the podcast mastering side, he actually, for his own mental health and his own mental space, he goes down to the coffee shop and works from there every couple of days, right? Gets a couple hours in there, and he's very cautious of, I'm not just going to sit there and just use their Wi-Fi and their power or whatever, but he'll get up and he'll have a cup of coffee or whatever and get on with his work, as you should. If you're working from a coffee shop, if you're spending more than, I don't know, an hour in a coffee shop, you really should get up and buy a coffee, right? Because they're providing you with a safe space. Anyway, but actually, I spent a lot of time when I first set up the company looking into how do I do this in a green and safe way. Like you said earlier on, like I've said as well, my daughter is very much in the we need to save the environment, Dad, because like when I was younger, there was no such thing as the saving the environment. Yeah, there was a couple of pop stars who were like, yeah, we need to do better. We need to look after our planet. But as you've said in other episodes, there's a state of emergency essentially on our environment, right? If we don't do something now, there won't be an environment. That's very hyperbolic, but it's also kind of true. And so what I did was I spoke to a lot of companies and spoke to a lot of hardware vendors about green computing. And I was like, right, okay, and this was like 2019 when I set up the company. There wasn't really a green computing initiative then, there is no way that I started it, because these things start years before they become popular, right?
Yeah.
But I was talking to a lot of companies. I was like, right, what do I do about green computing then? And they were like, well, what's that? And I'm like, well, I want to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that I could potentially create. I want to reduce the amount of energy that I use. And they're like, and you're in computer programming. You want to use a computer without using any energy. How does that work? And I was like, right, okay, I'll go talk to someone else then, because you're not gonna give me any answers. And so what I did was I spent some time looking into like computer hardware we could use that could flip between a low power mode and a high power mode when you stop using it, right? So like you step away from your computer, it doesn't need to be using loads of power because it's literally not doing anything, right? So I've got some scripts set up on some of my computers where if I lock the computer, it'll just immediately drop to low power because it knows I'm not there. It knows I'm not using it. I'm going to lock the computer and walk away, maybe make a cup of tea. So it drops into low power mode where it's not using very much. It cuts off like Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and stuff like that and just stops doing anything. Anything that was processing immediately stops.
Because that sounds like it's better for security as well, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, exactly. It's better for security. It locks down power usage, and it means that it can run a little bit longer when I get back, right? It takes about half a second for them to come back online, but I'm fine with that because that's half a second versus, the 5-10 minutes of me being away from my computer of it just using all the power ever, right? And then I then went ahead and went to start writing out if folks want to check it out, I'll pass it in for the show notes links, but we've got a green computing initiative at the company that I run where we're actively seeking the best ways to do things for the environment. Now, the problem is that it's still an area that's being researched, right? I could use like right now I'm using a Mac M2 Air, which is a ridiculously expensive computer, but it uses ARM chips rather than standard CPU. So it's running kind of the same kind of CPU you find in a phone. The reason for that is because they're way better at power usage, right? Because a phone has to be able to run for 12 hours or whatever every day. So they're better at running in low power environments. This laptop, I can get like 18 to 19 hours out of it, maybe even 25 if I'm cautious as to what I'm doing, in a single charge. So if I can charge it and get 2 work days, maybe 2.5 work days of work out of it before I charge it again, that's, I'm not saving a great deal. On a long enough timeline, I'm saving a little bit of power, creating less in the way of greenhouse gases. But the problem is that I'm still connecting to web services that use a whole bunch of greenhouse gases, right? So Am I the one creating those greenhouse gases? Because what we don't think about is the electricity that's running to get us onto the Wi-Fi, to get us over the internet, to get like us two talking right now. You know, I'm connected to my network via an Ethernet cable. It's drawing power from the computer to send the information down the Ethernet to the router, which then draws power to send the information over the internet. And there are multiple steps between you and me where the information is then exchanged, right? So I'm optimizing my end of it, but I'm just like I've optimized the doorway, right? I'm walking into the building where there's loads of power being used, but I've optimized that doorway. So at least the beginning of my journey is as green as I can make it. But the problem is that there's loads of research going on in the minute about, is it better to front load that? So I'm doing not very much at the front in the way of using energy, but loads at the back. Is it better to swap that around? So I'm using loads of energy where I am, but not so much in the cloud. Probably that's the better way to do it, right? Because everything I do is on the cloud. So am I better looking for a green cloud? And at which point, what is a green cloud, right? Does that just mean that they're buying those tax credits that I just talked about, where they offset the amount of carbon that they use to lower their tax bill, right? Is that what I'm paying for? Or am I actually paying for a company that's actively looking into ways of reducing the amount of power that they use? So a data center, when people talk about the cloud, they actually mean groups of data centers. That's just a big warehouse full of computers that run the internet. That's how the internet works, folks. It's just a bunch of computers connected together. One of the things that Microsoft did last year, and a bunch of other companies have done it as well, so I'm only picking on them because they've done it and they've been quite vocal about it, is rather than using air to cool some of their data centers, because that's where a lot of the power goes, is actually just cooling things down. Because if you've ever known your laptop to run hot, that's because it's not cooled properly. Traditionally, we've used air to cool them down. You just blow air across the computer and it cools it down. What they did was they submerged a bunch of their data centers into different areas and tried to extract their heat and run them to swimming pools or run them to houses. That's one of the ideas behind these heat pipe initiatives is can we generate heat elsewhere and pipe it through the ground into someone's house rather than piping the gas, burning the gas, creating the greenhouse gas that then warms the house. Can we do that centrally and then send it across, because it might be a bit of an easier burden? And they found that in their experiments, it kind of worked. That if you take this data center, you seal it so that none of the water can get in, submerge it, and switch it on, the ambient water temperature will rise, and then you can send that. You get I don't know how it works. I'm not clever enough to understand how thermodynamics work, but you can send that warmer water off somewhere else, bring in some cool water, which then warms up, send that off somewhere else, and it almost becomes like a feedback loop. When you send the warm water out, it cools down, you bring it back around, it warms up, you send it out, that kind of thing, right? Is that green computing? I don't know. And so one of my things on a monthly basis is I'm digging into what's the latest research. And there was actually, again, I'll get the link. It's totally about software development, but there's a bunch of, there was a podcast interview on a show called Software Engineering Daily, not so long back, about what is green computing. And they talk about the folks that were on there are academics, and they're talking about, we don't even know what green computing is. We need to come up with a system for figuring out what it means, right?
You can't just create the one climate change formula that's like, okay, well, carbon, energy, money, heat, right? You need these things, and these are represented by this, and then that's just your solution, because everything is so particular, so contextual, so relevant to what you're doing, where you're doing it, and when you're doing it.
Yeah. So you can't, using that, exactly what you've just said about it being context based, right? My company will never create as much in the way of greenhouse gases as a shipping company, right? The majority of the greenhouse gases that are created by humans are created by the shipping industry. Putting stuff on a big boat, big ship, I always get those two the wrong way around, but putting something on a seafaring vessel and transporting it over the water to another place, that creates a shed load, way more than any one individual or most companies will ever create. That one ship, boat, seafaring vehicle will create more greenhouse gases than most people will create in their entire lifetime in one journey, right? And so the context there is I can't walk to them and say, well, you've got to drop your emissions by 50%, because it ain't going to work. Right? But someone could turn to me and say, you've got to drop your emissions by 50%. And I'll be like, okay, right. Let's see about making this work then, because I can make it work for my emissions. But I'm using services that are created and served by other people. Do they count towards my emissions or not? Right? In a seafaring vehicle, the amount of emissions I'm creating by burning those fossil fuels to move that ship from one place to another, that's my carbon footprint. But me sitting and talking to you right now, are my greenhouse emissions coming from the router I'm using, the internet service provider I'm using, the number of, we call it hops, so that's the number of servers between me and the software you're using, where it's being recorded, and then the number of hops between the software and you. All of those steps in between, are they green? Are they my problem? Are they your problem? Are they the service provider's problem? Right? Where does that land? It's, like you said, entirely context-based.
Everyone's problem, nobody's responsibility.
100%, 100%, right? Like sometimes I'll go for a walk on an evening, and obviously we're recording this in early February. It gets pretty dark soon, and I'm walking around when all the shops are closed, and I have a Tesco, a Lidl, an Asda, and an Aldi near me.
Awesome.
And they are lit up like Christmas trees. They are closed. But
I mean,
all
some
the
of it
lights are
is
on.
shelf stacking and so on, but yeah, it used to really annoy me. And I'm going to say the name of the company, I'll probably blank it out, but like, because I like them as well. Like, it drive me mad. Like when I was in London and up here, of like, oh, just electrical stores. It's like having the TVs and stuff on when it's dark. It's like, nobody can like, I get it. I get the visual merchandising side of it, but it's like, please don't just turn them off. Like, there's no need. Then that costs you money. Like, is it really making you that much money having them on at night? And like, so,
it's bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you have anything more to say on climate change before I move us on?
Let's take a look. No, I think I've said all I can. All I'm what is it that I'm certified to say, because I haven't got a clue, because nobody's got a clue.
Yeah, but
right?
you're active about it, and you're investigating. It's obviously something that's considered for the business, and I think a lot of people. It's a hard one, because it's a hard one to sort of learn about, know about, and then kind of assimilate. So I can see why people don't want to. And if people are being very much like, I don't believe in any of it, then obviously that's going to be difficult for them to do anything about it or with it or for it. But yeah, so I'll move us on to, I'm going to do Brexit first, then I'll do social media. Since we have Brexited, has that made any change for you and the way that you work? I would imagine the answer's no again, because, you can work internationally still. Like, it's not like you're going to produce discs and send them the software in a big box by the hundreds or anything. So has it changed anything for you?
So directly for me, no. Well, it has changed a couple of things. I'll get onto those in a minute. I'm going to try and keep this rant free, and I'm going to try and keep this politics free. Which is difficult for me. Yeah, right. It's difficult for me because I feel quite passionate about everything that has happened. And perhaps not in the majority, if the majority is 1%. But anyway, moving on. But yes, it hasn't affected me as much as it has a couple of my clients. So, like one of the clients that we've worked with, he produces zines, and he actually wanted to produce a podcast episode on a physical medium. And I'm going to hold it up. I know that the listeners can't see, but he produced a podcast on a mini disc.
Nice.
Now, for those of you who are around for the 60 seconds that mini discs were a thing, you'll know what they are. But for those who don't, it's a 2-inch, I guess, plastic case around almost like a CD that could hold 90 minutes of audio at a stretch. And he was like, I'm all into defunct optical media. And we worked with him to produce that, and he produced a zine to go with it. And he could ship them to people in the UK. But the people who'd ordered them internationally, there was all sorts of issues. And I really felt for him. I really did, because there were all sorts of issues. And at one point, a colleague of his who works in the publishing industry actually had to set up a subsidiary in the EU so that he could essentially print everything there and ship them internationally from there, because it was way easier to actually print them in Germany
because they've got agreements with the whole world of how they can do their post and stuff, and we have got agreements with nobody in the world.
100%. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it politics free, but you're absolutely 100% right. 100%. And so, it was easier for him to set up two companies, one in Germany, one in the UK. The UK one would print in the UK and send to people in the UK and would be more expensive. And the one in Germany could print in Germany and send to the UK and would be cheaper. And I really felt for him, because I'm like, that's just a headache.
Why would you have a business?
Exactly. Exactly. But that didn't affect my business, my rules or anything like that. But what I did notice is that for a little while, it's all settled down now, but for a little while for the stuff that I do, because it's digital services, there was this question of, well, how does VAT work then? For people who don't run their own businesses, you may see on your receipts that it says VAT added at 20%. That's a tax that is a tax added at the value of the service or product that you're buying, that is then paid directly to it's HMRC. I was going to say to the government, but it's paid via HMRC to the government on the products and services that you are buying. The cost of it is passed on to you as the consumer, but then that money is then reserved and sent straight to HMRC at the end of every quarter, for reasons that I'm sure made sense in 1800 and frozen stiff, but not so much now. But I've digressed way too much. The problem is that when you're doing things internationally, there are agreements and laws about what you charge as VAT and where it applies. So usually it's at the point of sale. So in the UK, it doesn't matter, because everyone who's buying things in the UK from UK companies, the point of sale is in the UK. But for my international clients, the point of sale is in the UK. Fantastic. UK VAT applies, except it's being sold to somewhere in the EU, or it's being sold to somewhere in the Middle East, or it's being sold to somewhere in Japan, or somewhere in the US, where sales tax is different, because that's what it is, it's sales tax. Sales tax is different and may be charged to you as the service provider, or it may be charged to the person as the service consumer, I think is the right word. And so it made things really complex for a little while. And actually, for that reason, a whole bunch of international clients were like, I'm sorry, but it's too complex to work with you from an accounting perspective. So we'll put a hold on everything for now. And if we figure it out, not when, if we figure it out, we'll come back to you. And so that meant that, like, all of these big international clients that I was working with were just walking away, especially for small traders like us, like the company I run. We're only a handful of people. So it was like, they were saying, if we get it wrong, is it you that gets charged, or is it us that gets charged? And there was a short time where certain clients of ours in the States were like, we're going to have you file these W-2 things and file all these IRS checks and stuff like that, because it's required for us. And it was like, well, but okay, I'll fill in the form, but I'm not a US national, so it doesn't apply. But you got to fill in the form. Right. So then do I need to move to the US? Do I need to set up a US subsidiary? Like, it got really complex for ages. Almost because it wasn't thought through very well. But it got really complex for ages. And then it all settled down. And if I'm honest, my personal opinion, having talked to a lot of companies that are based in the EU, based out in the US, some people are like, brilliant, you got your freedom. Excellent. You already had it, but you got it. Excellent. Brilliant. And some of them are like, yeah, we don't want to trade with you because we can't, because it's too complex. I can't. They're saying to me that they can't figure out what it means to trade with a company in the UK anymore. And that's why, like, a lot of the massive corporations, like the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Googles, what are called the manga, right? Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Apple, right? None of them are actually based in the UK for this reason, right? Because taxation in the UK is complex. I'm sure that there will be tax experts listening in and accountants listening in going, Jamie, you don't know what you're talking about. And I absolutely do not know what I'm talking about. But it got ridiculously complex. And so many companies were just not interested. We don't want to know. Or perhaps a few of them were saying to me, and I'll preface this by saying I didn't want to trade with them, and I didn't trade with them. But some of them were saying, well, can you perhaps like trade out of a different country and then just like funnel the money back into your own country a different way, kind of like Starbucks does? And I'm like, no, no, because I want to pay the right amount of tax because that's what I do, right?
I bet you could do, though.
Oh, you totally could.
I bet it's very easy to do that. Quite easy 100%. To find out.
Oh, 100%. It's actually...
it'll be easier to do that than to actually look at how to do it, honestly.
100%. There was a book released last year called Taxtopia that talks about how to do it. So it's stupid easy to do, but obviously it's not good for the rest of society. If we're not paying our own way, then we can't pay for services. Everything breaks down. So I am like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's A, really, really dodgy. B, my accountant will likely murder me. And C, not very fair on the rest of society. So no, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, there you go.
Fair enough. Anything more to add on Brexit before we move on?
Not without getting on a soapbox telling everyone my own personal opinion, which I won't do.
We could do that on another podcast.
Absolutely.
So, social media.
Yes.
So this will be an interesting one. I would expect... I mean, I should have checked out some of your content, really, to be fair, before I did this. But it was... various reasons, I haven't had time. But yeah, so... Did you? Well, I'll let you tell us about it. But I'm thinking that you probably had quite a content education based approach to the whole thing and had like a good idea. I mean, obviously you cracked on to having like hitting a good niche with the podcast and providing something that there was a market and then like an eager audience to sort of learn and a community to develop around. So. Yeah, what's been your approach to social media? And normally I'm asking how much you kind of value that and do you see the value coming out of it? I'm guessing for you as well that it's like, yeah, it's really important. I definitely see the value and I tend to get what I want out of it. But yeah, what's your approach and how do you feel about it?
So like my idea behind social media is it's simultaneously the best thing ever and the worst thing ever. And essentially, it's because it's become a time sink. I have worked with people in the past who set up rules on their computer that like, hey, computer, if it's between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., actively block every single social media platform ever, which doesn't really work. Because for a bunch of reasons. A, the rule exists, so you know how to set it, which means you know how to break it. But B, a lot of the tools that we use as developers, like if I get stuck, I'll go onto Stack Overflow and search for a question. They have tracking cookies on there for Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that because they want to know where you've come from. If you've come from Facebook, they want to know that. If you've come from Twitter, they want to know that, which means that parts of the website break. So you can't always get the answer that you need. And sometimes when you're searching around on Google, Bing, whatever search engine you want to use, sometimes the answer you need is on a social media website because that's the only place it's been posted. So then you can't get the answer. And then obviously you disable that rule, you click on the link, and then you get a nicely worded email from IT, what you're doing on Twitter all day. And then you have to go through the whole process. It's not personally me, but obviously people who work at some of the clients that I work for then have to go through the process of, no IT, this is what I was searching for, this is the answer I needed, nobody knew the answer, it was on Twitter, there you go, here's the tweet, can I have access to the computer back now, and can you cancel my disciplinary for using social media at work? So it's simultaneously the best thing ever and the worst thing ever, right? I'm gonna stay very clear of like all of the vitriol and horridness that's shared on Twitter. I'm going to take and Facebook and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take the what I'm hoping is the hip, funky, groovy view of social media, in that it's a great way for people to exchange ideas. But the problem with me was that I found it was using all of my time. Like, I'd be standing in the coffee shop in the queue, oh, it's going to take ages to get this coffee. I know, I'll just pull out my phone and just doom scroll through Twitter for a minute. Right, I've done that. We're still no closer to getting the coffee. I'll go on LinkedIn. Right, we'll look on LinkedIn. Great, I've done that. Oh, I'll look on Facebook. Oh, brilliant. Okay. Wait, there's this TikTok. Right, I've got to check out TikTok, see what that's. Oh, and there's Threads as well. And Blue Sky. Brilliant. Okay, so there's all that. And now there's YouTube. Okay, fair enough. So I can check my YouTube. What have I got in my subscriptions? Brilliant. Okay, are there any more? Probably. There's about 1 million of them. And then I found that, like, I was just wasting time just looking at them all, right? And this is my own personal perspective. I felt like I was wasting my time. I'm not saying everybody's wasting their time. Obviously, social media is a job, so that is not wasting time. But partway through 2023, I've brought him up already, my friend Zach. I followed the steps of my friend Zach and just declared social media bankruptcy. I just gave up. Like, Twitter got deleted, Facebook got deleted. The profiles are still there, but like the apps were gone. And LinkedIn got deleted. Again, the profile is still there, but I just deleted the app because what I found was setting up that barrier to entry of, okay, I've got to pull up the browser, type in twitter.com, hit return, or x.com, or whatever we're calling it, and then log in, which requires me to go into my password manager and authenticate using a fingerprint and a one-time code. Then when I get to the login of Twitter, I've then got to put in the one-time code. It's just not worth it. So I'll just stand here and look around. And I found that I was spending less time on my phone, which means my phone is using less power. Hey, green initiative, right? But also, I found that I was being less stressed about current affairs, right? You know, things that are happening in the world. I won't mention them by name, but the thing that happened in October, you know, over in the Middle East, things like that. People are naturally upset from all different directions, but does it change the way that I do my work on a day-to-day basis?
And what can you do about any of it?
Absolutely.
It's like, what use is that information to me? Like, how does that help?
Yeah, it is absolutely shocking what did happen and what it's led to. The things with what's going on in Ukraine is shocking. But
equally, like, okay, right, you're telling us about this. What are you doing about it?
Yeah,
because we can't do anything about it, and like, also, you don't want us to. Yeah. But what are you doing about it? Why are you telling us this awful stuff if you're not doing anything about it?
And all it leads to is different people
anger and
upset.
Depression and division and making things worse for everybody.
Absolutely. And people are angry and depressed and divided for different reasons.
Yeah, enough already, and they don't need further aid in that direction.
Exactly. So I was like, no, I'm done. So I don't have the apps. And like I said, I've set up security on there with like multi-factor authentication, so I have to use an app to get into the. So like I have it's what's called a one-time time-based code, right? So there's a 6-digit code that changes every 60 seconds. I can only use that to log in, and so that makes it more secure, but increases the barrier to entry. So it makes more effort. It takes more effort to actually get logged in. So I've actually walked away from all of them. I only have LinkedIn on my phone because there's a bunch of people that I'm meeting up with. I mentioned earlier on that I'm going out to America very soon at the time of recording. There's a bunch of people that I only have access to send them messages through that. Right? We haven't exchanged actual personal information. That kind of makes sense to me because like that conversation is limited to that scope, right? Whether it should be or not, but I've got that installed, and all of the others I've got. And so if I want to use them, I pull up the browser, I log in, I do what I need to do, log out and close it, right? Because then the door's closed, I don't have to worry about it. But all of those, the ones that are still around that I still use, like Twitter/X and occasionally logging into Facebook, maybe it's because I'm an old curmudgeon that I keep those two around, but those are the two that I keep around. And I'm also on Mastodon as well, but that's because I noticed that at the time when it was purchased, a whole bunch of people in the technology space leapt off of Twitter and went to Mastodon. And I'm like, well, if I want to talk to those people, or if I want those people to hear about the stuff that I'm doing, I need to be there. And so the apps are not on phones and devices, but I log into them once every couple of days, just have a poke around and see what's happening. I don't post much there about, here are my podcasts and this is the content I'm creating. But what I'm actually doing is I'm part of the conversation. So if a conversation comes up, like today I received a new retro video gaming device in the post called a Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. And so I jumped onto Mastodon to say, hey, I've got this new device. I'm looking forward to setting it up. Has anyone got one? And a bunch of people linked me to a bunch of like setup guides and apps that I can install and stuff like that. That's what I'm there for. I'm not for, hey, look at this thing that I've created and isn't it great? And I'm similarly with the company. We're not there for, look at how great we are and look at how great this is. It's like, here's this cool thing that we found. Go check it out. Yeah. And then if you want to, give us a call and we'll tell you how we did it. Right. Because like I'm all about giving value. So for me, social media has always been giving value because I only have a certain amount of personal bandwidth, right? And that's the phrase I use for like the stuff I can get done in a day, right? Because for those who may not know, if you run your own company and you have employees or colleagues or whatever you want to call them, there's a load of paperwork that goes into that, a load of work. And then obviously if someone's ill, you got to keep a log of it, like how many sick days can they have before they have to self-certify, and if everyone is taking holiday days, how many days have they got left, and all of that stuff. Anything that you do at your company has to go through someone, and when you're a small company, it goes through one someone. And when you're in my company, that one someone is me. And I have work to do as well, right? Mm-hmm. And so, there's been evenings where I've just been sat at this computer filling in paperwork and doing the busy work of running a business because that's what you got to do. And so I don't have the personal bandwidth to jump onto any of these social media sites. And I've actually, it's bad for the social media companies, but I've been pushing people in that direction. I'm like, think about your personal bandwidth. What can you get done in a day? I'm not talking about productivity. I'm not talking about effectiveness. I'm talking about the 24 hours in a day. How much of it is your time and how much
you
of
have
it is
to give to stuff. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, and I back that up to people with like, you don't need social media. Social media needs you.
Yeah.
The only way it works is if people post there, right?
And if people spend time there, and the only reason people and advertisers post there is because people spend time there. It's that whole sort of, yeah.
So in answer to the question about what is social media for me and how's it affected my work, it largely doesn't. I'll jump onto LinkedIn to talk about some project I'm working on, or to remind people, hey, you can hire us to do some stuff. But like, there is a social media account on Twitter/X for the company I run, but we've never gotten any business there, so I just don't go there. There is an account and it's set up and it's sitting there stale, not doing anything. I've reserved that name. The same with Facebook, right? There is no way I'm going to get any work from Facebook because it's where people go to socialize, not where companies go to socialize. It might be business to consumer, McDonald's, Adidas, Nike, because there'll be people out there who are like, I'm following McDonald's because I want to know when the new burger's coming out, or I want to know when the new shoes are coming out from Adidas. I'm greatly reducing that, but obviously that's kind of what they're doing. But nobody's going to follow a software development company to find out when the next software development thing's coming out, right? So
I mean, they might be looking for like work, maybe. I guess a lot of people would, if you're in the field, if you're in the industry, you're going to follow companies that you potentially target in, or you'd be like, I'd like a place there. So I guess there's that side.
Yeah. But like I said, when I can't convince people to reduce their personal bandwidth use of social media, I'm like, stick to the ones that make sense for you, right? TikTok's loads of fun, but are you getting anything out of it that you can't get out of YouTube? If you are, fantastic. Stick with that. Not a problem. Twitter/X, loads of fun. But if you're not producing or consuming anything, then why are you there? There seems to be this thing, especially in the podcasting communities that I'm in. As soon as a new social media site is created or somebody finds out about one, quick, go get your username and sign up and have it on your phone and be part of the community. Yeah, but why? None of the people
you're just spreading yourself thin, aren't you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And more importantly, none of the people I'm targeting are there, right? So I could go set up a Blue Sky if I wanted, but none of the people I'm targeting that I want to talk to are there. I could go set up we got Threads, but nobody I want to talk to, that I want to advertise to, that I want to communicate with are there that aren't anywhere else. So it's just silly to me just to spread yourself, like you said, spread yourself that thin. But so like I say, I'll log in, poke around, check DMs and stuff like that. But I've actually limited myself to 15 minutes a day. And that isn't a lot, but it's enough to get like the top of your feeds and see what people are saying. And then I just sort of walk away. And then I'll rely on LinkedIn. I don't limit to 15 minutes a day. I'll check maybe 2 or 3 times a day just to see what's going on, what people are saying, and to see how projects are happening. This is how we got connected, right? I was on LinkedIn. It popped up. I was like, "Hey, Simon, let's have a chat because I'm in Leeds. You're talking to people in Leeds. Let's do this." And so that's a great bonus of that. You can then connect with people. But I've found that the ones that I check 15 minutes a day, I'm getting no use out of. So maybe I'll check them 15 minutes every other day going forward. I don't know. Everyone's different, right?
So I'm looking at the time. Do you have to dash off anywhere?
Oh, no, I'm fine to stick around here.
Okay. So we've done all the questions of how this decade is pushing and pulling you around. So let's give you some power over this now. If you could change any 3 things about your work, what would you change?
So I think it's more about the industry rather than my actual work myself. When I started getting interested in computer programming and making stuff, like not everyone, but most people who get into software development, computer programming, software engineering, whatever you want to call it, come from I want to make a game background. And what I've noticed is in the 90s, there were a lot of companies that would literally chew people up and spit them out. I could name a bunch of them, but there's kind of no point in naming them, right? But there were a very, very big software development companies in the 90s would chew people up and spit them out and treat them very much like you should be grateful that we've given you the opportunity to work on this, right? Whereas actually, it kind of should be the other way around, right? Well, actually, there shouldn't be any passive-aggressive anything in it, but if there has to be passive aggression, it should be the other way around. You should be grateful that I'm turning up to work because you're treating us so badly, right? There are stories of people putting in 100-hour weeks, and not coming home for weeks on end because they're sleeping at the office, or they're coming home to have a shower and then go back to work because the software, the game, whatever, has to get out on time. And that has largely continued, but tapered off out of the 90s into the 2000s and then into the 2010s. And we're actually, I think, seeing a resurgence of it. And so now that there's a whole new generation of people in the industry who have never witnessed it, they're now seeing it. And so if I could change anything about the industry, it would be allowing people to not be treated like that. Because one of the things for me is mental health is like the most important thing for me, right? Right now, I'm overweight, right? I make no bones about that. I don't get up and move about so much, but I'm pointing at my head for obviously people are listening in. I'm pointing at my head. I look after this, right? Because without this, without my brain, without my mental health, nothing else works, right? And so from my perspective, and I've been really worried about this. I've noticed that a lot of companies in the last year or so are doing mental health days. And that's great. And I've looked into some of them, and some of them are like, yeah, we brought in a nurse practitioner, and they've talked about ways that you can exercise or eat better or checking your blood pressure. Brilliant.
Somebody talk to everyone.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Gather round, everyone. It's mandatory fun day.
That's so healthy for our society. You always feel great, don't you, when you come out of a classroom?
Absolutely. But yeah, like you're saying, right? The thing that's worrying me is that a lot of those companies are putting in like minimal effort. Like they're trying to put a plaster on a gaping wound, but the plaster isn't even it's not sticking, right? Because all you're doing is you're bringing in someone to talk about like things that you can do to change. And it's not necessarily the things, it's not necessarily always the things that people are doing outside of work that are causing the problem.
It's like, what are the things that you would like changed in here? It's that thing where it's always pushed back onto the individual. Like you have to do this. You have to change your light bulbs. You have to sort your mental health and look after everybody else's. But watch other people's mental health. Yeah, and it's like I mean, you don't want the company deciding everything, but you want that, like you say, the institution and the individual, there should be, okay, there's a massive power disparity there, but there should be a level of respect.
Yeah, 100%. There was, when I first got into the industry, they'd swung 100% the other way. And a lot of companies started advertising, essentially like they were creches. They'd say, "Oh, come work for us. We've got a foosball table and slides in the office and beer on Fridays." And I'm like, "That okay? Why are you doing that? Right? Why are you having to offer that? What's there must be some downsides you're covering up, right?" And I felt very much entering the industry like I was being treated like a 5-year-old. I'm like, I'm not here to slide the slides. I'm not here to, you're not Pixar. Stop trying to be Pixar, right? Pixar get away with that because that's the kind of products that they make. You are a business line application services company. Behave like a business line application services company, right? I don't want to go to work where there's infinite beer on tap because someone's going to get drunk and then something's going to be said and there's going to be aggravation in the office. Beer at work is a bad sign. If there is beer at work, run away from work. The way that they built the pyramids was beer at work. They achieved great things. But it was to keep the beer was given. It wasn't really beer; it was all like liquid bread. But it was given to the people who were building the slaves who were building the pyramids to make them happy during the day and knock them out at night to make them complicit. If somebody's giving you beer at work, run away. Unless, of course, you work at a pub, then that's probably okay. But the only things I would change about, and it's about the industry. I'm trying my best to make where I work a happy place for everyone that works for me, and I'm genuinely like, right, what have we done badly this week? And by we, I mean the company. I don't mean you or Jeff or Stephen or whoever. I'm like, what have we done badly as a company? And I need you to be honest with me, because I'm a big believer in Kaizen, which is this Japanese idea of small incremental improvements make a huge difference. So it's like continual growth through small incremental improvements. And I'm like, if there's literally, if it's like, the way we use Teams and you hate Teams, then we'll move to something else. Because that's going to negatively impact your day. Is, oh God, I've got to open Teams again and it crashes when I do this, or I can't figure out how to send this file or whatever. Then we'll use something else, because the happiness and the mental health of my colleagues is if they're not at work, then nothing gets done, right? And if they can't work because they're having a problem with the tools they're working with, again, it comes back to that compassion stuff I was talking about at the beginning, right? If they can't get the work done because the tools are getting in the way, we need better tools. If the process is getting in the way, we need better process. But I feel like a lot of the really big companies are like, well, what was it? There's a great line in The Good Place. Well, that's the way it's always been done. Well, with the greatest respect, that's the way it's always been done, has been used to excuse away, bigotry and racism. And, I'm being hyperbolic when I quote the Good Place there, but that's the way it's always been done. Is the worst reason to constantly do something in business. You need to be looking to change. You need to be looking to innovate. And like I said, the business of software development seems to be going back the other way of, we'll chew people up and spit them out. And my worry is, because I'm a big advocate for mental health, that companies are, like I said, that it doesn't feel like it yet. But every time I see a company talking about being really public about we're supporting our workers through mental health awareness days and stuff like that, I'm like, are you really though? Or are you just checking a box? Because it looks like you're checking a box, right?
And the other side of that is loads of it was just like, we'll put on these days, we'll have art retreats, we'll do all of this. It's like, will you give me any more money? No, we're not even going to discuss that. It's like, one of the key things that makes people happy at work is being well remunerated, is getting paid their worth. So maybe pay people more and they'll feel better. It's that
exactly.
whole thing.
100%. And it's actually, it came to a point last year where I actually started volunteering with a mental health support charity. I say in my area. They've got 172 as of today, but in 2 weeks' time it'll be 173 different places where people can go on a Monday evening and get help and support and peer support for what they're doing. It's Andy's Man Club, and it's for anyone who identifies as male, who is over the age of 18. You can walk in. There's no bookings. There's no waiting list. You don't even have to give your name. Nothing like that. It's a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits and talking about what's going on with you and having a bit of a laugh afterwards. That's literally what it is. Monday evening, 7 p.m. There will be a place near you, and I'm all for it because I'm like, of the many different gender identities, those of us of a certain age who identify as male have been taught from day one, you don't talk about your feelings, you don't talk about what's going on with you. And I'm really glad that thought process is dying off. But there's still a lot of people who are raised in that environment. And there are support groups for people, specifically for people who identify as female, specifically for people in the LGBTQ community. But up until like 5 years ago, there weren't that many for people who identify as male. And this one's particularly, Andy's Man Club, it fits both, because like I said, identify as male, not just physically male, identify as male. So if you are a trans person who identifies as maybe trans male, you can join in too, because what we found, or rather what they have found, like I'm just a volunteer, I'm not part of the organization, is that men of a certain age and background, or rather people who identify as male of a certain age and a certain background, do not talk about what's going on with them. And what I call doing something silly, because I don't like to use the S word, because obviously if I'm around my children, I can't say it because it upsets them. That tends to be one of the only ways that people find to get out of the situations they're in, where actually talking to someone can totally help. And that's why I'm like, look, right, you're putting on your mental health day, you brought a nurse practitioner in and they're talking about ways to eat to lower your blood pressure. Actually, why don't I come in and talk to you about the biggest killer in the UK and how it's really, really easy to start the journey of seeking help. Because that's what it's all about. It's about talking to people. Right. And that's why I'm such a, because I know for a fact from my own experience, I have been told by hundreds of different project managers and colleagues along my career so far, so you're not part of the team then when I'm leaving at the time that I'm supposed to leave. Right. It's 5 o'clock. It's time to leave. I've downed tools and I'm leaving. And they're all sitting around going, well, are you not part of the team? I'm like, I am part of the team. The game's ended. Right.
Yeah.
The whistle has been blown.
The hours that you pay me for, yeah, I'm there.
Absolutely, right? When the football game ends, they don't carry on playing football; they stop, right?
Are you gonna give me some extra value from your end of this deal? Of like, If I stay a bit longer, you're gonna throw in a few more profits for me? Am I getting? We're all a team, aren't we?
Yeah,
aren't you part of the team?
Exactly. But yeah, so like that tends to happen so much in software that like people are led to believe that it's like some kind of gift from the heavens that you have a job. And it, all right, maybe in the economy right now, maybe because there's a lot of people who are looking for work, but once you get into work, it's not like it's a gift from the heavens. It is
I don't think
a
you're
job,
ever lucky
right?
for having a job. There's nothing lucky about that. Like someone's got to do it. You know, if there's money for it and someone's going to do it, like there's nothing lucky about that. And most of the time, if you're good, then you've either earned your place there or you will be earning your place there. Like the whole thing is just ridiculous to me. It's like being really grateful for something that you don't need to be grateful for. Like Absolutely. This is why people start businesses as well, because anyone can just create work.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. And I tell people that like every single company is both a software company and a customer services company, right? And so if you could do either of those two, you can do work for any company anywhere in the world, right? And like we were saying earlier on, right? There is customer services involved in any transaction between two people or two entities, right? And so if you could do either of those, you could start your own business and provide services for other people. And then you're no longer lucky to have a job. And for you were listening, folks, you didn't see me do the bunny quotes, but lucky to have a job. You're actually going out there and, like you said, you're creating the work. You're making the work happen. You're making a positive a more than positive contribution to the economy, because you might end up giving someone else a job because maybe you can't do all the work yourself. So you're actually boosting the economy, giving someone else work, and you're not sitting there going, I don't turn to my podcast guys and go, well, aren't you lucky to have a job? Aren't you lucky that I create all of this? No, they're not. They're lucky for a whole bunch of other stuff. They are incredibly skilled and talented, and I'm lucky to have them on my side, because otherwise they go work for someone else and they would be producing amazing stuff for other people rather than producing it for me or for my clients, right? So I'm the lucky one. They've got all the skills. They've put the effort into learning it. There's no luck about putting the effort in, right? There is a little bit of luck about being able to put the effort in. But if you put the effort in and you learn something, you learn a skill or a technique, and you're able to make money with that, that's flaming fantastic, right? The people you are using that skill for are the lucky ones, right? And that's why I'm so against that thought process. And that's the only thing that I would change about software development right now is that attitude of you should be lucky. You should think yourself as lucky that you've got this job. Why aren't you a team player? Because I absolutely hate that.
Okay,
but that's me.
I'm going to say it anyway because but I don't know how much we're going to go off. But it's got to be said, gender balance in the industry,
yeah.
Is the crunch, is a lot of it macho posing and just that entire sort of thing? Would it be better if there were more women working in the industry? Would that take the edge off? I mean, it's all speculative stuff. I don't necessarily want you to respond, but if you feel that you want to add something and you feel you want to say something on that, but yeah, I just wanted to flag it as well.
No,
so,
totally.
But yeah, if you want to respond, say something, but don't feel like you have to really say something wise or anything significant about it.
So I think the gender imbalance in the industry goes back a long way. There is a long history of it. Pre-1970, it was 70-40, the opposite direction that it is right now. And that was go watch the movie Hidden Figures, right? The main people in that film were some of the most important people in NASA's history. And not only were they female, they were African American. Right? If you get a large enough collection of software developers in a room or perhaps in a stadium, they will be majority white men, Caucasian men, right? There will be a percentage that are maybe East Asian descent or maybe Afro-Caribbean or African American or whatever, right? But it will all be, the majority of it will be white men. And that is just shocking to me. It really is. I tell my programming colleagues, anyone can do this job. Anyone. As long as you are okay, right. Real quick test, right? Can you be a programmer? Can you make a cup of tea? Are you able to take the task of make a cup of tea and break it down into steps? Put water in the kettle. If there is enough water in the kettle, switch it on. If not, put water in the kettle. Guess what? I've just wrote a program. It's not in a computer programming language, but I've talked about an object and a property and talked about a conditional step. If this property of this object is here, do this. If it is not, do that. That is programming. It's just taking a really complex problem and breaking it down into the smallest possible chunks. That's the first step to being a programmer. So guess what? At the beginning, I taught you how to write to the screen in BASIC. Now I'm teaching you how to program. But yeah, the gender identity and gender representation and race representation in the software industry is embarrassing. And it goes way deeper than anything I could ever get into. But I think you're right. I think that having different voices from different identities, this is why diversity and inclusivity always works really well when you enable it in software, because you get people one of the things that all five of the manga companies I talked about before, Microsoft, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Amazon, right? All of those companies hire exclusively in their engineering departments. They go over and beyond what I think most companies would do when it comes to hiring someone who's neurodivergent. Neurodivergent is one of those terms that means someone who's maybe on the autism scale or they have Asperger's or something like that, right? what I know of the
ADHD,
Microsoft hiring,
dyslexia, dyspraxia, like
yeah, all of those
special
things,
learning needs, all of those.
yeah, any of those kinds of things. One of the things that I know Microsoft do, because I've talked to the people who actually hire at Microsoft, is they say, look, if someone's coming in and they're perhaps have anxiety, we will work with them to arrange to pay for their travel, to pay for their hotel, and to buy them a suit or interview appropriate clothes. We'll then ask them when they get in, if you want to take a break, literally just tell us. And we'll walk out the room. You can go into this. Maybe there's a quiet room. Maybe there's a room where there's just like blue walls or whatever you need. We will make it happen, because because what they say is, we're not after hiring you. We're after hiring you, the person, not you, the disability, not you, the labels,
characteristic, right? Or the labels. Yeah,
we're after hiring the person, not what the person has to deal with. And so their hiring process, and like I said, I know that Microsoft do it because I've spoken to the actual people who do it. Their process is very, very much, how can we help you to get here and present yourself in the best way possible to the other people that you're going to be talking to about your ability to do the work. Because it's about your ability to do the work, not about what demons you have to fight, or what maybe disabilities you might have, or different labels that you have, like, if you're autistic or if you're dyslexic or any of that. It's got nothing to do with any of that. It's about, can you do the work? Can you prove to us you can do the work? And I think I would be very hard pressed to find a UK company that would do that. I feel like that's very much a US thing, and very much we are literally at the top of the game thing. That, like I said, the mangas, right? They are the 5 companies that are right at the top. They used to be called the FANG companies, so it used to be the same acronym, but spelt differently, with Facebook rather than Meta. But yeah, it feels like we need a better hiring process, and having people from different backgrounds is going to fix that. But what I also notice is that people who are early in their careers, especially in software development, people who've maybe graduated from uni, they're super excited to get on with the work. They tend to be like, how do I work 25 hours a day? Because I'm really excited to be doing the work. And lots of companies prey on that. They prey on the fact that someone wants to get into work at 8 o'clock and start working at 8 and work through till 6 and not have a lunch. They're like, brilliant. They're more
generally
effective.
Easier for men to do as well.
Exactly. Yeah. If I
For
don't
various
have
reasons.
Yeah, of course, right? If I don't have any dependents, I can do that. If I don't have anything else going on in my life, I can do that. Whereas, like you said, people who don't identify as male tend to have more dependents, tend to have more things going on. Whereas, it is easier for a lot of, it seems easier, I guess, for a lot of men to fall into that trap of, I'll work 15 hours a day and it'll be brilliant, and I'll get loads of work done. And companies will effectively hire for that. I've seen and been part of interview processes where we've had 3 people come in, and one of the people on the panel has said, who do you think will get the most money out of? Like, who will provide the most value? What do you mean by value? Who will be the one that turns up at 8 o'clock and works through till 6 and doesn't have a lunch break? Well, that's not what we're hiring for, is it? We're hiring for culture fit and the ability to do the work. Yeah, but they're all fit the culture and they all do the work really well. Well, let's hire the one that's going to put the extra effort in. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be part of this panel then. If that's what you're doing, I don't want to be part of this. Because that's
how do you know that's extra effort as well? That what you're saying there is free work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Let's have the one that gives us more free work that we can exploit more.
Absolutely.
I mean, it makes business sense to a degree, but it's also like, but over the long term, even if someone's prepared to do that, that is gonna exhaust. Like it's the whole thing of running a machine in the red. It's like, why do you want to run it in the red? Like, oh, well, I'm getting more speed out of it, or I'm getting more production out of it. It's like, yeah, but at what cost? Doesn't that shorten the lifespan? And what's the cost benefit there? Are you actually getting more, or are you just using it up quicker?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and turnover in software development, turnover of people, and burnout is just, it's always, I mean, it's never going to be as high as, say, medicine, Because medicine, I feel like, is one of those industries where people burn out fastest and burn out the hardest, because you have to work those 15-hour days because it's literally someone's life is in your hands, right? But I remember I was feeling burnout a number of years back, and I called a meeting with the boss, and I walked into the meeting and I burst into tears, and I said, I can't do it. I can't get my fingers to work. I'm no good at this job anymore. I can't do it. And he got me to look him in the eye. He said, look at me. And I said, I can't. I'm looking at the floor, and I'm tears rolling down my face, and I'm like, my career's over. He said, look at me. And he wouldn't shut up until I looked up and looked at him. And he went, nobody's died. So the software gets done tomorrow. Doesn't matter. It's fine. It's not a problem. Take some time. Come back into the office and get back to work. Come out of this meeting room when you're ready. Take some time and come and, if you want to take the rest of the day, take the rest of the day. But nobody has died. And it was it took until that point for me to go, wait a minute, I've been doing this all wrong, because I had been conditioned to work in that way, and I just think that we shouldn't be working that way.
It's
we
normalized for you.
Living
it's like
to work.
You work in that environment and you're doing it every day, and it's like, this is the way the world works. This is what people do. This is the way. And even if it's like, oh, other people are doing different things, but this is the way this works, and this is what I have to do. It's like, no, it's a choice, and you're making that choice. And like, okay, you can't just walk straight into another job or whatever, but ultimately you are making that choice.
Absolutely. And my friend James always says, if you can't change your job, change your job. And it works perfectly, right?
That's really good. I like that.
Yeah. But he also says, dress for the job you want. That's why I always dress like Batman. But but he's absolutely right. If you can't change it, then change it. And that's what I did. I got to a point where I couldn't change what was happening, and so I changed the environment in which I worked, and I went and set up my own company. And it's not going to work for everyone, right? It's not like, if you are a bus driver, you might not be able to set up your own company driving buses and carry on. You might be able to.
You might do a better job.
Maybe. I don't know. But what I mean is like the process, the paperwork, the actual infrastructure involved in setting up your own company isn't for everyone. But if you can't change your job, then change your job. Like, if you can't change how it operates, go find somewhere else. Like you said, you might not be able to walk into something tomorrow, but maybe look around and see what there is, right? Because whatever skills and techniques and things that you have that you're making money with, you will be able to do them somewhere else. I'm not saying, hey, everyone, go hand in your notice and find another job. Yeah. But you've got to live to work.
Sit down and do a little cost benefit analysis. Like, where am I? Am I on a journey of self-destruction that I'm just adding to with jacking in my job? Or am I like in a place where I'm unhappy with this and I have the faculties to kind of change this and move on?
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump onto UBI quickly.
Yep.
So UBI, Universal Basic Income, if that was something that was happening, how do you think it might change your work and your relationship to it, I guess?
So I feel like this is the problem, right? UBI is a fantastic idea. I agree completely, right? Everyone should be secure in that, like, there should be a way for everyone to be able to live a certain lifestyle, right? We need to create a lowest band of lifestyle that is acceptable for everyone and get everyone to that, right? If that's, everyone has the ability to live in a house, let's not beat around the bush. You walk around Leeds today, you will see people who are living in the streets. They're sleeping rough. Maybe they don't have a place to stay. If we could make it so that everyone is able to live in a building of some sort, then one that's looked after, right? Not just like, here's a derelict building, let them all live there. But what I mean is like a place for everyone to live. Then because like, what you've got to remember is people who perhaps are living rough don't have what's called a not fixed abode. So they don't have a house, they don't have somewhere to live. They can't get a job. But they also can't get a bank account. And if you can't get a bank account, you can't get paid. And if you can't get paid, you won't be able to get a job. If you don't have a bank account, you don't have money, you can't get a house. So if you are unlucky enough to fall into that, how in the heck are you supposed to get back out? Whereas if we had an acceptable lowest level of I don't know, life, I can't think of the right word, but like a lowest...
Like a benchmark, a standard, like a lowest standard.
Yeah, a lowest standard that we all agreed to, that would be backed perhaps by a UBI or some other system, then I think we would get... Yeah, okay, we'd get people who'd be like, well, why do I need to work if I'm getting paid some money to buy my stuff, right? But maybe that would be the lowest level required to be able to get you in a house and get you food, right? But if you want a PlayStation, you got to go work to earn the money to buy a PlayStation, right? Things like that, right? I think maybe that would work out a little bit better. And I feel like more people would be able to... Okay, so I've got to really, really pick my words very carefully here. I feel like more people would be in a position where they could go out and work if they wanted and, contribute positively to the economy. But I also have to think that if suddenly everyone gets £1,000 every month magically out of nowhere, the prices of things would go up, right? That's just how that would work. And there's not a great deal we could do about that, but there is actually a social experiment going on. I think it was in an episode of Planet Money. I will look it up and I will get you the link if you want to share it in the show notes, where they talked about this experiment that a bunch of economists are doing. They're not doing like physically, but they're running through like calculations. What would happen if everyone got $1,000 every year the moment that they were born? They get Social Security as soon as they are born. And then when they turn 18, they can cash it all in and they can spend it on what they want. And one of the people that they interviewed, I'll translate from the American because they don't talk about deposit, they talk about down payments. But they said...
I'd lock it till 30 at least, because otherwise, you're going to have everyone, like young people being young people, but also you'll have an entire massive industries that'll be built up to predate on them.
Yep.
That's the main thing.
Oh, no, of course. But they were saying that what's the biggest thing that stops you from buying a house, from having house security, like a security of accommodation? And they said a down payment or a deposit on a mortgage. If you can provide that from a small stipend in taxes or some other way of boosting, bringing that in from the economy, that means that in a couple of generations' time, everyone has the ability to buy a house. And that means, so that means that maybe rental properties might go down. Landlords might get upset, but, oh well. I'm sorry if you're a landlord.
It'd be a first time, wouldn't it?
Exactly, right?
Them getting everything they want all the time.
Absolutely. But like, if you could turn to a child and say to them, when you grow up, you are going to own a house. You have the ability to own your own home. They wouldn't understand it, obviously. But like, they get to 18, 19, 20, 21, and they can go, you know what? I want to buy that house, and just walk in and buy it, right? A couple of years ago, they were talking about how people wouldn't be able to buy houses because Generation Z and Generation Y and Generation Alpha were all wasting their money on avocado toast and video games. Well, like, imagine if they could buy the avocado toast that they wanted in video games, but also be able to buy a house. They wouldn't have to worry about, well, my rent's gone up, so how am I going to afford that, right? I think that it's less about how it would affect the industry, but I think how it would affect the economy. I think that it's a great idea that people are looking into. How do we raise the bar for the minimum acceptable quality of life for everyone? And I genuinely think, yes, it would upset some people right at the top who are making loads and loads of money, because they're like, well, most of my workforce may not want to work anymore.
They're
but
always
you know
upset.
What? Doesn't, yeah, exactly.
They're never happy, are they?
Absolutely.
They're always moaning about something.
You know what? They can take that money and dab their eyes with it and have a bit of a cry, I think. I think they've earned enough money to be able to do that. But I think
let it all out.
Absolutely. Go dive into your vault of money like your Scrooge McDuck. But no, raising that lowest barrier of acceptable life experience, I think would be, it's an important thing that we have to do. And I think it's something we have to do in the first world, so we can, I hate talking about how there's different divisions of how the world works, but if we can do it here at the top, we can then feed that back down to the other countries who are not as economically stable, perhaps, and bring everyone up to that level, right, where everyone is over time, everyone will then be living that lowest level of acceptable quality of life. And I think UBI is the first step on that journey. It's going to take a while, because I think most of the billionaires and the trillionaires who don't want it to happen, they'll have to go away, is what I'll say, right? But once they've gone away and they're no longer worrying about it, then what I've seen is people who are Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen A, maybe Gen Beta when it happens. I don't know if they're going to call it that, but the next generation of people who are coming up, they tend to be more empathetic and more compassionate to what's going on around them. So maybe it's about time that it happens, and maybe it will happen. I really hope that it does, but I feel like it will affect the entirety of the economy, not just the industry. But going back on that, if I have a workforce who have that security of owning a house, right, then they won't have to worry about where's my rent coming from or anything like that. And with us all working remotely, then that means that they can work from their house and not have to worry about, well, I can't go out today because if I go out, then, I have to lock my house. I genuinely, I've got some people who work for me who do not leave the house because they're worried about locking up and all that kind of stuff. And they're worried about what if the landlord comes around, not because they're doing anything wrong, but just because I don't want anyone in my space. And because if they own their own home, they don't have to worry about someone going into their space, right? And they don't have to worry about, well, the landlord's decided to raise my rent, or these new taxes have come in for people who are renting, or I can
sell
have
my house, or
yeah, exactly, right? Or I can have a dog, right? Or a cat, or a pet of some kind, because sometimes you can't have that when you're renting, right? And some rental agreements are like, you don't run a business from your house, and you can't work entirely remotely. You have to leave the house so many hours a day.
You can't have a partner, and you're paying rent to me, so I get to say who you are and who you see and what you do, because I'm in charge of you now, because you live in a property I own.
Absolutely. And it goes all the way back to that mental health, right? If you're able to live securely in that kind of situation, you don't have to worry about anything negatively affecting your mental health in a place where, I'm going on a million different tangents here, and I am gonna shut up in a minute. But like, if we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you don't know about this is a theory from psychology about how to reach self-actualization. Self-actualization is where you're able to do the very best that you are physically capable of doing. Anything that you are the best at doing. If you look at sports stars, if you look at Olympiads, if you look at actors and actresses and musicians who are right at the top of their game, they are self-actualizing every single day. The only way you reach the top of this pyramid is if you fill in all of the levels up towards the top. Yeah. And it's laid out like a pyramid because the things at the bottom are way more important than things at the top. And the things at the bottom, there are a few that I won't mention because they're to do with, the things that are not podcast friendly, but one of them is having a house, having a roof over your head where you can live, food security, right? Love from people around you, right? You can't do anything else if you don't have those three. And that first one, having a house, having somewhere to stay, is one of the most important things. If you don't have a stable place to stay, you're going to be all over the place. So if I can get my workforce, my colleagues, my people that I work with, to be in a position where they have a place to stay, they don't have to worry about where am I sleeping tonight, then they're gonna be on the journey towards self-actualization. By self-actualizing, they're going to be doing the best work ever. That's a really long-winded way of saying I think I'm all for UBI, and I think it will affect the world, not just the software.
Okay. I'm not going to, because we're going well over here. So I'm going to just throw it over to you, not necessarily to talk about anything that we haven't talked about, because I think we've covered a lot of ground. But yeah, where can people find you and find the business and also your podcast?
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to talk about everything.
No, it's been great. I would ask more questions and let us go all over the place, but I'm thinking of the edit.
Of course, right? You're going to be editing this one for weeks, but man, it'll all be me. It'll all be me.
Even if you're just listening back, it's just the time, and it's that whole thing of looking at the big bar of waves, and you're like,
yeah. I always
tell people, like once you start it, you're golden. But,
totally. Yeah, totally. I always tell people, for every 30 minutes of audio, you're looking at 60 to 90 minutes of editing. To give people who are listening a rule of thumb of how much time Simon has spent. If you've listened this far, make a note of how many minutes there are and multiply it by 3. That's the least amount of time he spent editing this, right? So, Yeah, I'm sorry. but no, I really appreciate you giving me this time just to talk about some stuff. So you said about where people can find me. I'll give you a bunch of links to some stuff. They'll all be in the show notes or somewhere, I'm sure. But I guess best place to connect with me if you want to learn more about me is LinkedIn. For various reasons, I think I have my account set to you can't search for me, but if you have the link, you'll find me. And you know, that's the best place to reach out to me. I do run a software consultancy, software development company, and that's RJJ Software. I'll spell that phonetically: Romeo Juliet Juliet Software. It's not the words Romeo Juliet Juliet, but sometimes my enunciation isn't quite clear. And just like Simon, we do some podcast mastering stuff, editing, production, all that kind of stuff. But we also do software development too. So if you're after some apps being built or some services being built, and if you head over there, there's like case studies of people we've worked for and stuff like that. You'll be able to learn a little bit more about that mini disc project that we did, which was incredibly challenging. Not on a negative way, but just like, how do you fit 100 minutes of audio onto a 90-minute medium, right? It was genuinely loads of fun. But yeah, that's what we do. We are based in Leeds, and you'll see me out and about if you're in any of the big networking events or anything. It will have gone by the time you listen to this, but there's a series of cybersecurity stuff that Lee Gilbrank is putting on in the Leeds and Manchester areas. Keep an eye out for those. Those are brilliant. He's got the Leeds Cybersecurity Conference coming up in September, I believe. And he's just asking for donations at that event. It's not paying for a ticket, you're donating towards a charity, right? So you know, that's pretty cool. But that at those things, they have like a track of speakers who are talking about like anthropology in cybersecurity, or like tools you can use in cybersecurity. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, you should definitely go along. It's really cool. And I think he gives out like free tickets to some people as well. So definitely check that out. And that's a brilliant thing that's happening in Leeds. And yeah, if you see me out and about, just bump into me and say hi, right? I'm always interested in meeting new people and seeing what's going on. So I'm sure there'll be a picture of me involved in the show notes at some stage. So if you see me walking about, come up and say hi. If you want to talk to me about mental health, or specifically about Andy's Man Club, and learn a little bit more, I'm more than happy to talk about that. You know, I'm more than happy to talk about what works for me with mental health and what doesn't work for me and what I found helped. And I just hope that you've all had some value out of this, right? Because I've been talking now for 2 hours and 30 minutes. So I apologize to everyone.
Thank you again to Jamie for being my guest. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. If you'd like to know more about Jamie, you can go to linkedin.com/in/Jamie, or go to the website, which is rjj-software.co.uk, or you can follow him on Twitter at podcasterj, or on Mastodon at gaprogman. Links for Jamie's podcasts are in the show notes. If you are in Leeds, or you are from Leeds, if you are Leeds, then please be my guest on this show. Yes, I am speaking to you. I still need to find 881 loiners to interview, so being a guest is the greatest help. You'll get free advertising and media experience, and you'll be part of a unique project in our unique city. Whatever you do, I'm interested to hear about it. You don't have to be online, and you can even be anonymous if you would like. You will enjoy it. Like, share, follow, and subscribe to Working Hours, and please help to support Working Hours financially. Go to patreon.com/workinghourspod to give monthly from £1 a month, or go to Ko-fi, that's ko-fi.com/working hours, to donate any amount you'd like. It's just a few clicks. It's honestly not difficult, so don't be put off by having to make too much effort to support. You can email Working Hours at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Work for peace and plan with kindness. Cheers, ears. Take care out there and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook at facebook.com/Western_Studios Western_Leeds, and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/Western-Studios. Western Studios Leeds will help you realise your podcast for only £25 for an hour of podcast work. Need podcast production, recording, editing, or any podcast admin doing? Need it all doing? Do you want or need a podcast host or co-host for your podcast project? Then get in touch with Western Studios Leeds Limited. Email makemypodcast@western-studios.com to get your podcast made. I am available to third sector organisations, small to medium-sized businesses, and individuals who want to make podcasts or create other digital audio content. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to show off your expertise in your field? Want some help creating your show and format, or just some support learning to podcast and getting going? Whatever your podcast needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds. Go to western-studios.com and use the contact page to drop me a message about either working hours or about your own podcast project.